Good evening. My name's Councillor Corinna Smart, and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome you here tonight. I'd like to wish everyone a Happy New Year, since this is the first meeting of the Council. I'd like to welcome everybody who's online as well. Okay, so we will now begin with apologies for absence. Wendy?
I've got Councillor Ashmay-Garrawell.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest under the Town Planning Code of Practice and any other communications from members. We've obviously had a lot of emails on Hartington Road. We've had some emails on Leighton Court. We've had communications from the applicant on Crane Bank, and we've also had some emails on Ferry Wharf. I don't know if I've actually been, I know Hartington Road site very well, but I actually did visit it again on my feet as opposed to passing it by in a car from my friend's house. It's actually down the other end. So I did that. I didn't speak to anybody particularly at that time, but there may be other people who want to declare interests on other matters as well as anything specific. So I'm going to look around. Michael.
Thank you very much. I declare an interest on the agenda item 4, Ferry Wharf. I live very near that. I'm a leaseholder of a flat very near that, and I do believe that it would affect my. It'd be a pecuniary interest, I think. So therefore I think I'll have to, if with your permission, I might stand out of that one.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Is there anyone who wants to add anything? Councillor Samia Chowdhury.
I just wanted to say I have received emails and few phone calls, and that's.
I was basically declaring for the committee because pretty much all the emails I've received, several in my capacity as chair of the planning committee, but I've also had lots of others that I've just assumed that declares it for everybody, but it would only be if you had some specific extra. So I'm going to go to Councillor Guy Lambert.
Yeah, I also live on Ferry Quays, on the better end of the estate. And furthermore, I have met with the applicants, and I've met with. I used to be a director of the Ferry Quays Management Company. I'm not anymore, but I've had a lot of conversations about, and I've also met on site with the director of planning and the leader and the applicant. So I know it well. I don't think I've got no pecuniary interest. And I feel comfortable with being engaged with that one.
Thank you, Councillor Mel Collins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've flirted with a representative from the developers, very briefly.
I'm not sure you should be declaring that publicly, Mel.
There you go. On Leighton Court and 17 Hartington.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's probably covered everybody. Yep, okay. Now, I'm actually changing the order of the agenda tonight. We will start with item 6, which will become 4, which is the Hartington Road. Then we will move on to Leighton Court, which is number 5, and then Ferry Wharf, and then Crane Bank. So, sorry, I beg your pardon.
It's okay, no problem. I just need to leave by 9:30 if we're not done by then. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. Minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of December. Okay, so I'll be taking those as accuracy. If anyone has any questions on the accuracy? If not, any matters arising? No, that's fine. So can I sign those as a true record? Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks once again, Wendy, for those. Okay. Now, okay, so we will now move to Hartington Road, 17 Harting Road, Chiswick. That is actually pages 53 to 122 in your main agenda. And there is a small addendum, and I'm terribly sorry that the addendum hasn't got numbered pages. So it's, I think it's about, hang on a minute. It's the third page for a few pages on Hartington Road. And I just imagine that knowing all of you on the committee, you'd have read this. So I'm sure that if there was any queries on any of that, you'd have raised that with me already. Okay, so we now move on to the application. So first off, Matthew, can you introduce it for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Rees. I'm the Head of Development Management, and I'll be presenting this item tonight. This application is 17 Hartington Road. It's to the southwest of Chiswick train station, fronting onto the river, backing onto the River Thames, sorry. I'll quickly get a slide up on the screen showing the location of the site, but this is going to be talked at length during the consideration of the application. It is a property that fronts Hartington Road. It's a locally listed building within the Grove Park Conservation Area. There are extensions and alterations and a conversion to the 17 Hartington Road itself. I'm not going to linger on that because I'm going to suggest that's probably not what the area of contention is. It's changing it from 2 flats to 1 house, single-story extension, rear dormer and an outbuilding, pursuant to the demolition of existing extensions on the property. It's the 4 properties proposed at the back of the site, which is going to be the focus of these discussions tonight. You can see on the screen at the moment, it's the 4 units backing on towards the River Thames. To the south of them is Chiswick Stave. Immediately adjoining the properties is number 1 Chiswick Stave. So that's going to be something to note. And then to the north of properties along Hartington Road. So you'll note that the application site has got a significant large rear garden area, which is where the properties are located. We mentioned the addendum. I just want to be clear. I think councillors have seen almost all of the letters that I mentioned in the addendum. There was 2 extra letters that were sent straight to the case officer, which you may not have seen. One was a relatively short email just reiterating concerns about flooding, which I know you've heard at length. And another one was giving some rather expert advice on hedgehogs and impact on hedgehogs. I'm suggesting that's encompassed into the ecology statement that we'll be asking for, but we can amend that condition or add to that condition that we resolve the matters concerning hedgehogs that have been raised. So if that's okay, I'll leave it at that, Chair, and then move on to the speakers.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so we'll now move over to the objectors, and if Mukti Campion and Adam Gosling can come to the microphone, that'd be brilliant. And just to remind everybody, they will have 5 minutes for their statements, followed by Ward Councillor Sam Hearn, who will have 5 minutes. And then I'll take questions from the planning committee members of all 3 of them. And if you want to direct, obviously, your questions directly to anybody in particular or to in general, and they will decide who's best to answer the question prior to turning back to the officer to go through the report. So, okay, you have 5 minutes. Jimmy, who's our legal advisor, will actually time the 5 minutes, and he'll give you the nod when it's 30 seconds to the end, unless you want to make that different. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, so over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you much, Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Adam Gosling. I'm a chartered town planner and a director at HGH Consulting, a firm of specialist planning and development consultants. I've been asked by concerned residents of Chiswick Stave, which adjoins the application site, to review and advise on the proposed development for 4 houses in the back garden of 17 Hartington Road. In my opinion, the application should be refused for a number of reasons. First and foremost, because the area where the new homes to be built is located in flood zone 3B. This represents the highest risk designation for river and tidal flooding. Identifying flood zone 3B identifies an area where residential development is prohibited for very good reasons of safety, particularly with climate change making flooding more likely and unpredictable. This same area is also at a very high risk of surface water flooding, making it doubly vulnerable. The application simply should not have been put forward to the committee for determination due to its flood zone 3B status. Whilst the officer's report asserts that the site can be treated as flood zone 3A, no conclusive evidence has been provided as to why this is appropriate for such a vulnerable site. In fact, the Environment Agency passes the responsibility for determining the flood zone to the local flood authority, METIS on behalf of the council, while METIS passes the responsibility back to the EA, laying down a list of conditions for the area to be treated as 3A. None of these conditions have been met. Repeat, none of these conditions have been met. The site is still in flood zone 3B, an area prohibited for residential development. A flood consultant, Jonathan Cage of Cage Consulting, has been engaged to provide an independent expert view. He confirms the area is still in flood zone 3B and also comments, and I quote directly from his report, the EA breach analysis shows that the site would be inundated to the maximum level of hazard for both current day as well as future date events. It is therefore irresponsible of the LPA to remotely consider allowing new homes to be permitted in such a location that is clearly going to put their residents at risk. It is also questionable whether the properties will be insurable and therefore whether mortgages could be obtained for them. Even if the site were to be treated as 3A, which it is not, it is 3B, the applicant has ignored the sequential test, as required by government guidance, to provide detailed evidence that there are no suitable sites for development in flood zones 1 or 2. All and any alternatives need to be examined, but this has not been done. Instead, the applicant relies upon an argument that the scheme will help the council meet its housing targets. This is an extremely weak point. The proposal is for 4 private multi-million-pound houses. It will do literally nothing to address the most pressing planning issue in the borough, to deliver affordable housing. A simple Zoopla search shows that there are currently more than 71 million pound plus houses within the area of Chiswick. It's not credible that the provision of luxury private housing is an exceptional reason to allow development in an area that's risk of flooding. Nor has the applicant demonstrated that development would not increase flood risk to neighbouring homes. Indeed, the current defences are in a state of poor repair, and proposed improvements would need to be done simultaneously with neighbouring properties to be effective. There are simply too many unanswered questions here for the council to even consider approval. The scheme is also of a poor quality design in the conservation area and is backland development in a garden of a locally listed Victorian house, which in itself should not be permitted and is contrary to adopted policy. The approval of this scheme would set a dangerous precedent by allowing background development in flood zone 3B in a conservation area. It's simply inconceivable that it can be approved as it fails most basic tests of safety and of national and local planning policy. We therefore urge that the application is refused. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mukti Jane Campion. I live at number 1 Chiswick Stave. I've lived there for 30 years. My house adjoins the back garden where the new 4 houses would be built, in fact, attached to my house. And what I wanted to show you, I think, Matthew, you've jumped ahead a bit with the slides. If you go back, that's the second one, that's right. If you can see that, that's what I look out on from my balcony. And what you'll see is a very different layout to what's at Chiswick Stave, which is a deep basin behind the flood wall. And there are lots of features about it that to us mean that it looks like a way of capturing floodwater very safely. And if anybody actually came to look at the flood defences, they would see that's exactly where the water is designed to go.
30 seconds, Speaker.
Thank you. If you just have a quick look at the next slide, which shows you a sort of profile of the way that the land, Matthew, could you just move on, please? Thank you. The house is on the right, the land slopes down, creates a basin before it goes up to the flood wall. It's in that basin that the new houses are proposed, which to us just seems amazing because there are so many different dynamic water flows. There's the groundwater, the surface water coming down. There's a potential for tidal breach water coming up and over the flood defence, and there's water always coming in under by the river. I'm going to stop there, but to us it's lunacy to build in the space. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Okay, so now, Councillor Sam Hearn, if you'd like to come and do your 5 minutes, and then I'll get you both back. I'll have to check that. Okay, I'm aware you've got 5 minutes, and you'll be warned 30 seconds before the end. Okay.
Thank you. I will try not to repeat what's already been said, but that will obviously be quite difficult. We're not, as you've already said, not interested in what's been done at the the on 17 Hartington Road. That seems sensible. It's the large garden to the rear, and a substantial part of that garden, as you can see, is often below the river level. So you've got wet river, you've got dry land, and you've got a sizable chunk which, as the tide goes up and down, the water fills it up. We believe this plan contravenes a number of Hounslow's local planning policies and national planning policy framework, which was revised in July 2021. I can quote from that, but you basically shouldn't be building on floodplains if you've got any alternative. Hounslow's Green-Blue Infrastructure Strategy, which was published just over a couple of months ago, this really does not, a scheme like this does not comply with that. I think I have a quote here, which has been provided by Abundance London, the ecological charity. Green space is to be prioritised. Gardens are to provide space for biodiversity, reducing the impact of surface water flooding. Gardens are to be depaved. The council will promote awareness of the ecological value of domestic gardens, and obviously that's, I say obviously that's not what's going on here. You'll see in great detail the mitigation that's planned, but again, as Abundance says quite bluntly, to state the blindingly obvious, the loss of mature habitat resulting from building new houses, driveways, parking areas, paths, etc., will result in clear loss of habitat, not net gain. The aspirational enhancements, none of which can be legally enforced nor ongoingly maintained, are a poor replacement. They do go on. I'd like to mention in passing the Thames Path. There's a couple of references in the paperwork before you. The most substantial one is at 7.114. And apparently the applicant has demonstrated that a Thames Path access could be secured to the rear of the gardens of the new properties in future, should this ever be made possible. This is not considered appropriate, blah, blah, blah. It's not obvious, and I would appreciate it if somebody here tonight would explain how this has been demonstrated. We are, as a council, backing a scheme to build a pedestrian bridge under Barnes Bridge, which was to promote this pathway, and yet when we come to a development like this, we really appear to be making absolutely no provision. There is no public access into this site. I think in terms of habitat, we're failing to understand here what a large garden, mature garden like this provides. And as I said before, Abundance's view is that not only are the metrics, the measurements have flaws to them, but it's just very, very obvious that you're not building 4 houses on a site like this is not going to improve the habitat for wildlife. We've already had mention of new housing. Clearly, that shouldn't be the overriding consideration here, in my opinion. You're the planning committee. You'll be seeing this at every meeting. This is 4 houses. The target, again, as it says in the officer's report, we're well on the way to achieving that. So that should not be what's driving your decision here. It's really whether this is compliant with our other policies. There's been huge local concern. You've probably seen that. People are concerned about flooding, and they are concerned by the loss of habitat. There have been other attempts to build on this going back to, I think, as far as 1985. They've all been turned down, and there are good reasons for that. And I think just to sum up,
30 seconds, Speaker.
This committee knows and understands the key role it has in delivering the borough's climate emergency action plan. We can't just keep on doing what we've always done and expect to deliver on our pledges to protect residents and wildlife habitats from the worst effects of climate volatility. And those include heavy and sustained rainfall, increased surface water, flooding, endangering lives and properties. If just bear with me for a second, we have Councillor Gerrawell, Councillor Prittam Gerrawell, warned that flooding events will become more common due to ageing sewers and climate change. And this was in response to what was experienced across the borough last July, and basements and local shops were flooded in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would you, Mukti and Adam, would you like to join? I don't know how you're going to, you've got maybe another seat. I'm sorry that we haven't provided you with 2 mics. We usually do. So I apologise for that. I hope you're okay. Okay, so now if you'd like to listen to we're going to go through the officer's report, because you may well want to. I'm correct? No, I'm not going to do that, am I? I'll ask you questions now. Sorry. Okay, so over to the committee. Councillor Alan Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Chair. One of the points the applicant makes is that that mitigates this application is that the Thames tidal flood defences at the rear of the site secure this site from heavy rain. Do you agree with that? Or if not, can you explain for us why not?
I think there's a bit of confusion there about surface
Oh,
water.
sorry, I've not finished.
Sorry.
Yeah. Given extreme weather, you know, the extreme weather climate that we live in. And to what extent, to your knowledge, has the Thames tidal defences been tested to fit with this application? And would you consider fit for purpose or not, as the case may be? Thank you.
I think one of the things that's really alarmed us about this whole process is how few people have actually come on the site, including people from the Environment Agency, to actually assess the current flood defences, which to us look to be in very poor repair, but also they're not continuous with mine. So there's already a weak point there. And what concerns us is that, yes, the tidal defences are excellent, but they are being tested more and more each year. And we've seen this week alone, the Thames Barrier has had to close twice. This has nothing to do with rainfall. This is about storm surges and high tides. And this is going to become more and more the case. You know, since 2014, there were 48 times 2014 that the Thames Barrier had to be used. And in the 1980s, it was opened 6 times, I think, so closed 6 times. So you can see that there is a progression in terms of how much more affected we are going to be by these changes. Those tidal defences will need to be repaired and improved. And the problem is we still don't have the details of any investigative work to the foundations. And you shouldn't even be thinking about this until that work has been done. Those defences are not secure. And there's no guarantee that the impact of those defences failing will not result in flooding of other properties downstream. So there are a lot of unanswered questions.
Could I just adding to that, notwithstanding the issues in terms of those defences, one must still go back to the point about flood zone 3B. Residential shouldn't be going there, full stop. And there's been this debate that's gone backwards and forwards between the council's consultants and the EA over its 3B status, which has not been resolved. But even if it were 3A, which is not, it still needs to be put, residential only needs to go there in exceptional circumstances where there are no other options for residential to go. None of this has been proved. This is what I find quite perplexing about this scheme. So it's, you know, it's very important about those flood defences, but the critical point is, why is residential being considered in the first place, bearing in mind the 3B status and the lack of addressing the sequential approach and the exceptions test? Thank you.
You got a supplementary?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, if I may. The applicant talks about, in part of the report, there's a 1 in 20-year chance of something going wrong here. Are they accurate? Should we sleep easier in our beds with that advice?
Well, I feel we can both answer that. That's a sort of almost a philosophical question, but it's not one I'd be personally be. And we go back as well to the issue about flooding and mortgages and insurance of the properties. You know, and it runs to the heart of the huge uncertainty over this site and this proposition. I do want to add to that, Mukti, as well.
I don't know whether it helps, Councillor Mitchell, but this site, you've seen how it's below the level of the river often. It's a tidal stretch, but it's often below. So it's acting as a sump And that's not only for itself, but for land all round it. So it's actually draining, and the water, as I understand it, not an expert, drains out under the defences. So it's performing that function now. If you put a lot of other infrastructure in there, you're not improving its ability. And what I believe is proposed, again, I've read the detail, but I'm not an expert, is actually pumping the water out. So you've got something functioning now that's going to have to be replaced by something mechanical. And you are going to be pumping sewage uphill to make the whole thing work, and lots of infrastructure.
Sorry, just to add in one final point, a local resident, Rob Smith, who's here tonight, was the senior partner of one of the largest firms of quantity surveyors and cost consultants in the world. And to quote him, in over 30 years, we undertook hundreds of millions of pounds of housing in both the public and private sector. At no point we ever engaged in a project where a planning authority approved the development to build 4 houses for sale that were totally reliant on pumps operating every time it rained or a resident flushed the toilets. There's a huge amount of engineering just to try and even attempt to make this work in this location.
Okay, right. Thank you. I've said now I've got 3 people who have indicated they wish to say. I'll take Councillor Richard Foot first, and then I'll come over to Councillor John Todd and Councillor Michael Denness. Oh, scratch your head. Sorry. Okay, do apologise. So, in which case, I'll take Richard Foot first, Councillor Richard Foot first, and then I'll move on to Councillor John Todd.
I'm refraining
okay?
from scratching my head. I was looking at the drawings as best as I can from across the room here of the street, and it seemed to me that down the street that there are a number of dwellings at the bottom end of the gardens along the road. Now, I don't know whether these are sheds, garages, beds in sheds. I've no idea because it doesn't tell us, but I don't know if you know. And if you do know, are they occupied, and have they been subjected to flooding in the past?
Are you talking about summer houses and things on the river at the bottom of people's gardens?
I don't know what they are.
That's exactly what they are,
Yeah,
Councillor
that's
Richard
my
Foot. They're mostly
question,
summer
'cause-
houses or dashers or whatever else you might want to call them. Okay.
So when you say summer houses, are they occupied?
They're not occupied. No, what they are is they're just used to, and some of them have got moorings off them, so you can launch a small dinghy. Nothing major. It's not like huge, yachts and stuff down there. It's all tiny little dinghies and rowing boats and things. But all of those, there's not a bed-in shed type situation there at all, because they're not, and they haven't. No, none of them are all the way down along those bits that are bound the end, because they're very long gardens, as you can see.
Yeah.
And people have them because that's obviously where they can see the river from. So I can tell you that from my own experience. So would you like to confirm that?
I'd confirm that, but also you might be interested to know that there have been attempts to dig basements in properties in those gardens, and they've met with quite severe flooding issues, surface groundwater flooding issues. So we know that whole area is a damp area.
So I'm not sure if that's actually answering the second part of my question, which was, are you experiencing any flooding?
So that was my
those dwellings?
Yeah. So there aren't dwellings on the riverfront there. So as Councillor Smart explained, it's summer houses. It's basically people to go out and have a cup of tea and read a book.
Yeah,
it's not
I understand what they are.
Yeah.
But are they at any time flooded?
I wouldn't know. I don't keep those records. I can't tell you.
You don't know from the fact that they're your neighbours?
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't know.
All right.
No, I'm sorry, I can't answer
Sorry,
that.
I didn't catch who said that.
The thing is that
Tony, that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I don't.
I wasn't asking it of you.
No, it's a fair
I think
question. It's not something I can answer though. Yeah.
And also just to add to that, it wouldn't be recorded as actual flooding if it's just within the garden. It's not the same as flooding an actual domicile.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor John Todd.
Hi, good evening. Adam, if I can call you Adam,
Yes.
you kindly sent to all the members one of your report. So have you got a copy there? Or?
I do.
Okay. I think it's fair to say that the council's case is that the applicant with the help of third parties, has convinced them that the flooding is now designated to 3A. And so I'm looking at page 2 of your report, and I'm getting you to repeat what you already said, but I want to put the emphasis on it. Yeah. Is it correct to say that both the Environment Agency, a statutory body, and Metis, who are responsible to the council, have both indicated they may consider changing, but they have set strict conditions before they agree with that? So the net effect is, apart from all this dancing around on a pin, that it's still 3B and remains 3B. Is that correct? I'm labouring the point.
Correct.
Okay. Secondly, Mukti, I think you've been a very patient person. You've been very open with your correspondence. Is it correct to say that for months and months now, you've been waiting to get related papers from the council? So by way of example, a letter from the Environment Agency dated the 1st of September was posted sometime in November on the planning site.
It was never posted, only appeared in the officer's report as an appendix.
No, the actual letter. Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay.
weren't.
Well,
It's never been put up on the website. I think part of the problem is that, you know, the developer is completely entitled to challenge what the Environment Agency objects to, and, you know, fair cop to them. But the point is that if a developer is allowed to make a representation to change the flood risk designation of a piece of land, that impacts other people, and we should be equally allowed to have access to the evidence as to why it's being overturned or set aside. And we've never been allowed. Metis won't answer our letters. The Environment Agency refers us back to the officer. So it may all be very sound, but we've not seen any evidence. None of the papers that are referred to that the developer submitted a site-specific modelling exercise, that's not in the appendix. So we have no evidence as to why this has been done.
Okay, so it's a reasonable assumption that you've been materially disadvantaged in making your case.
That's how we feel, yes.
And secondly, the people of Grove Park, Ditterley, are equally disenfranchised on the basis that there's nothing for them to read and form a view and submit an opinion.
You know, we all want to rely on experts, and we expect the Environment Agency and the local lead flood authority to have that expertise. It worries me that none of them have taken into account the local circumstances of this particular site, which is, you know, there is a basin. To anybody who looks at it, it looks like a place that floodwater can go safely. There's also the issue of surface water coming down, groundwater coming down. So I would really like to see all of those people stand there, look at the flood defences and tell us that this is actually not 3B, because it doesn't make sense to me. In fact, it hasn't. They're not changing the designation for the whole, it's not just 17, it's that whole area of back gardens going north. So how can they just set it aside for this developer in this particular garden? It does not make sense to a layperson who's lived there and watched the river tide levels going higher and higher. My bottom of my garden gets flooded in a way that it never used to. So it does alarm me that these decisions are being made without that expertise being out in the open for public scrutiny.
Okay, I think that's very clear. Yeah, can I come back to you, Anthony? Your report talks about the pluvial flood model that's been submitted, but is not attached to the report. Mm-hmm. What comment do you make about that?
Well, we've engaged.
What would the absence mean? That
well, we've engaged Jonathan Cage of Cage Consulting to review the officer's report, and he's about how the applicant may overcome the EA's objection, and he's quite simply said this should be available for review. Without it, remains doubt as whether the EA, objection has been addressed. So therefore, in our opinion, I would venture that the members don't have the full information in front of them to make a decision.
Can I go on, if you wouldn't mind, Chair? You allude to the Grove Park Conserve Area appraisal on page 6 of your report. I've been to the site, as you know. It's a wonderful Victorian house with a large garden, and I think the two go together in the context of the Grove Park area appraisal.
Yeah.
Would you like to formally endorse that and give any additional views you've got to that?
Yeah, but obviously at any time when a large garden associated with a property is, the garden is removed or built into, diminishes, I would say, to a material degree, the setting of that property.
Okay, that's very clear. I'm coming back to you if I could, Monty. I'm looking at paragraph 755. I'm not quite sure. Have you got the report?
Of the which report?
The council report.
I
planning
haven't got
report.
that in front of me, but if you read it out, I'll know what you're talking about. Or just
Have
remind
you got
me.
it, Sam? Have you got? No, okay.
Not 755.
All right. Yeah. It's talking about the property, and it says, furthermore, though, at the ground floor, there will be a projection of approximately 4.75 metres right up against the boundary of 1 Chiswick Staith. This projection would be sited 2.7 metres from the nearest habitable room window, and its height would align with the top of the ground floor window in question at number 1, meaning that the impact on light and outlook would not be unreasonable in that instance. You may have mentioned that to me. That seems very close, so I'm giving you the opportunity to.
It is very close, but it's also up to the first floor of my
Well, can you
house.
try and put it in context?
Yeah, so that's incorrect, actually. It's up to the first floor. Okay. It is very close, and I don't understand why I've repeatedly asked for that to be separated, because all the other developments along the river, there is a gap between them. I don't understand why it has to be butting up. It's a completely different architectural design.
Would you mind if, yeah, I want to make sure everyone understands what we're saying. Yeah, it's, I hope I'm not being too patronising, but it's another house very close to yours. It seems incredibly
It's stuck
close.
to my house. It's not near mine. It's stuck to it.
Okay, well, I didn't realise that. So where's the gap then if it's stuck to your house?
There isn't a gap up to the first floor.
Well, it just talked about 4.7 metres. That's wrong, is it?
I don't know how they got that 4.7. It's a gap of, I think, 1.7 metres. I mean, the developer can confirm that, but it's only a gap at the upper levels of about 1.8 metres. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's joined at the bottom. So their loo will be flushing next to my kitchen, just to give you an idea.
Okay, Chair. Thanks very much. Thank you, Victor. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just having a quick look round. Has anybody else got any questions for the objectors? Councillor Guy Lambert?
I just wanted to understand sort of what happens now. You mentioned that your garden floods from time to time. Does this garden, the subject garden, flood? And if so, where's the flooding coming from? Is it coming from the river, or is it coming from groundwater that can't escape?
So I should be clear that there's a bit of my garden that's beyond the flood wall, as is there next to it, number 17. So that's the bit that started flooding more regularly. The flood defences so far have been fine. But, you know, I used to be the chair of the Chiswick Staith, and we commissioned a repair to our revetment wall. And at the time, the PLA told us that these defences would have to be built up. You know, in my lifetime, it's not a sort of remote thing. Climate change is upon us now. It's not something that's up, you know, in the distant future, which is why building in a zone that's 3B at this time just seems so ridiculous. You know, in the 1960s when Chiswick Staith was put up, nobody talked about climate change. The land was built up. The land that they're going to build on, if they get it, is much lower. It's 3 meters lower than Chiswick Staith.
I just looked, but in particular in 17, the Garden of 17, you had a nice diagram which shows it's a nice sort of lake effect.
In the event of a tidal breach.
And does that currently get waterlogged, do you think, or
only
not?
from surface water, groundwater? We know that the groundwater, the underground springs that go out into the River Thames, and because of all the vegetation and everything, I think it regulates the flow. What worries us is when you take all the vegetation out, you've got the surface water. There was a slide up recently. The area where the houses are proposed is the most vulnerable site for surface water as well as potential tidal breach. So you've got the double whammy potentially, and that's where the houses are proposed. You put concrete into 2/3 of the garden, you take out all the trees, all the natural regulation that's there at the moment is gone, and everything relies on engineering to sort the problem.
So just to, as an adjunct to what Mukti has just said, flood zones are designated, they're not there to be reservoirs for water permanently. Ideally, in an ideal world, there'd be no water there at all. The Thames Barrier, it's doing its job. But what the EA is tasked with doing is to check if there were 1 in 20-year events. What happens? What happens when it's breached? And it's very clear from the EA's. This is from our flood consultants report, from the EA's own evidence that if it's breached, the site would be inundated to the maximum level of hazard possible. So if that, you know, if it does flood, it floods as bad as it can do, and so it's the maximum level of hazard for current and future events. So it's putting new houses in an area that's a particular risk. So there is the issue of whether it floods at the moment is germane, but there's also the fact of what happens when it does breach, what occurs, and the EA's own evidence says it breaches the maximum possible level. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Lukey.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. From living next door to this, or being aware of next door to this, should this development go ahead, how many trees do you think would be removed? The kind of quality of trees as well that that would be removed, and also the applicant and the officers will tell us that there's mitigation there for any flooding, for any sewerage. Would that why would that not be? Why would that not be enough for in your opinion? The other thing I'm not sure about, we've got a 3B here. What is 3A? What is 2? What is 1? In terms of Adam Gosling might be able to tell us in terms of flooding, and does it go above 3B to 3C or 4?
No, 3B is the highest.
Okay,
It's the most extreme. It's
what is 1 and 2 then? So when you walk down Chiswick Mall and it
yeah.
floods there, what's that?
That's so most of the areas where you would see housing being built would be in flood zones 1 and 2. Flood zone 3A is an area that still floods, but not to the same extent that 3B does. But even then, in 3A, you shouldn't normally be putting houses there unless there's nowhere else to put houses or there's exceptional reasons to do so.
Anywhere else in London? Sorry, anywhere else in London where development has been allowed on 3B?
It does happen. There can be exceptional circumstances that do allow it, but it's not the ordinary way that one would go about allocating development.
Sorry, Chair, and you mentioned exceptional circumstances, because I've experienced that before with development of metropolitan open land in my ward.
Yeah.
But for those councillors here that don't know what exceptional circumstances might mean, what might be exceptional circumstances that would allow development on a 3B?
One would be very, very acute housing need. There might be residential. You wouldn't normally go there. There might be some non-residential development that you would put there that wouldn't put people. It's eventually it's about safety. That's what the flooding is about. That there's you would put uses that don't put lives at risk if you're going to put them in there. So some commercial developments may go in a flood zone. If you were to go into flood zone 3A, for example, you may put obviously living accommodation at first floor level and above that is not going to flood, but it's still not ideal. We're planning consultants. We get sites all the time. If we get flood zone 3B sites come in and somebody's going to buy it, we'll say that's not a very particularly clever idea, because it's going to be very difficult to impossible to get planning permission for it, because residential development should not be going into flood zone 3B areas.
Should I just answer your question about the trees? I understand that there are an estimated 30 mature trees in the garden, and originally they were going to remove all of them. I understand that as a result of an independent tree report, that 3 or 4 will now be preserved at the perimeter. We still feel that's not enough, because there's a lot of healthy, mature trees in there. And however many younger trees you put in, it'll be 30, 40, 50 years before they have the carbon capture ability of the mature trees. The canopy cover, as the tree report says, will never reach the same spread because of the way they're constrained by houses and etc. The wildlife will not come back, not because there are not enough trees there, but because there's got human activity and light pollution. At the moment, it goes dark at night, it's secluded. It's a wonderful site for nesting owls, all sorts of things. Bats we see regularly. All those things, they will basically, not come back. You can put a bat box up, but bats don't like being around humans. There's very sort of fundamental common sense things. 2/3 of the garden will be concreted over. That's going to be a big drain, a big impact on the drainage. And the mitigations that you were referring to are highly engineered solutions for 4 houses, and they are very vulnerable to the pumps failing. The comments that your flood consultant said was that they're not adequate for the site because the pumps are going to be in the basements, and if there is a flooding event, the pumps get submerged, they stop working. Power fails, the sewage backs up. There's so many things that could go wrong. The freeholders, the people who are developing it, planners who are deciding it, they won't be interested in the problems afterwards. The 4 homeowners will have to deal with this stuff. And you're talking about maintenance in perpetuity. You're not just talking about, just for the first year. This is something that will be needed for the lifetime of the new development. So that's why you have to take it really seriously now.
So I'll just quote from in respect of the mitigation measures from Cage Consulting. To quote directly, the applicant has submitted surface water drainage proposals by way of mitigation, but they appear to be flawed. The basement area of the house is to be drained by a small pump with a discharge rate of 2 litres a second. Whilst this may be okay to deal with normal rainfall events, this whole basement would be subject to flooding by both surface water flood events and also by potential tidal breach. In either of these circumstances, the pump would not be able to deal with the level of inundation and would have effectively nowhere to pump, as the rest of the on-site drainage system would also be backed up and surcharged. So it just would fail.
Sorry, remind us who Cage Consultants are. Are their comments referred to in the report?
In my letter, yeah, they're an independent firm of flooding consultants.
Might also be worth a praise.
Oh yeah, sorry, and there's a point 12 that so that's in Jonathan Cage of Cage Consulting, independent flooding and drainage experts that we appointed on behalf of the residents.
Has that report been submitted to the council too?
It's part of my letter.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's gone to the officers.
It's gone to the officers and to yours.
And was that the one before Christmas or the one subsequent?
It was one on just after Christmas on the 4th.
Okay.
We were brought in quite late in the day when the residents were aware that the committee was happening so early in January.
And when were you aware of the flood report? When did you feel you had to consult with with Cage?
Obviously, in respect to the residents, they're not aware of what the officer's recommendation is until a week before committee. So at the time when they were made aware that this was coming forward to you for approval, they contacted ourselves to advise on it. So we had to act quite quickly. I'll just also quote, as Mukti has just said, in terms of this mitigation, the proposed new outfall to the river would need to have some form of flap valve. The river is tidal at this point, but it doesn't appear that any allowances were made within the drainage calculations for a submerged outfall, which would result in the under-provision of storage and backing up of the system, with low areas such as the basement, parking and garden being significantly flooded. And the drainage plan shows the location of the pumping station controlled kiosk in a basement, which could easily be in excess of 2.5 metres deep in water in a flood event. All electrics would clearly trip out in this scenario, so the whole lot would fail if it floods.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, and if you can return to the body, if you like, from the table, that'd be lovely. Thank you. Okay, so we now move on to the developers, the applicants, please. Okay, once again, just to remind you, you have 5 minutes and you'll be told 30 seconds before the end of that 5 minutes, and then there'll be questions from the committee. Okay, so I'll turn over to you now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. I'm Ben Wilson, the applicant. Residents One is a small family-owned developer. Business was started shortly after we moved to Chiswick over 15 years ago, most recently residing in Grove Park just off Hartington Road. When we decided to acquire the site, we knew that we had to bring forward an exemplary scheme, setting a high standard and a positive precedent for sustainable design and biodiversity in the borough. After lots of hard work from all sides, we have achieved this. In particular, we have ensured that improving biodiversity of the site has influenced everything. I'm proud to say that our proposals produce a significantly higher biodiversity rating than the existing site. Firstly, our proposals reinstate the existing house as a family home, removing several unsympathetic extensions, replacing a hard-standing frontage with a garden, which is to the benefit of the conservation area and Hartington Road street scene. In addition, proposals for 4 new family homes designed by architects Pilbara and Partners, who have extensive experience in creating low-density, energy-efficient and beautiful homes. I'll go through what I think are the main areas of interest. Firstly, the potential for flooding. In short, there is none. The Environment Agency has corrected an earlier misunderstanding and has no objection, and neither do your officers. The site benefits from flood defences, which mean there is a chance of a flood once in every 1,000 years. In line with policy, the homes have also been designed to mitigate this extremely low risk. Drainage will not be an issue. All tests have been carried out and the soil will soak away any rainwater and a fully sustainable drainage system installed. This has been agreed with the LLFA and no objections raised. Building on a garden site, Hounslow policy allows development in the curtilage of an existing dwelling when other policy tests have been met, as have been in this case. Notwithstanding, this site is unique. Its garden is not original, having been amalgamated with number 19's garden some years ago. It's 3/4 of an acre, significantly larger than the gardens to the north and the south. It's 93 metres from the existing house to the riverbank and is the only property with the ability for independent access. Therefore, development would not set a precedent. With the addition of 4 new semi-detached homes, the site density is very low at 18 dwellings per hectare, retaining a large proportion of open space. Trees. There are 30 existing trees on site, 24 of which are either dead or of the lowest category of tree with limited value and lifespans. The remaining 6 are of moderate category, with retaining 4 of these. Our landscape proposals seek to plant 73 mature trees, an increase of 47, all chosen for their high ecological and biodiverse value. This provides nearly 3 trees for each one removed. Biodiversity. We are pleased to say that our proposed scheme provides over 40% increase in value to the biodiversity of the existing site, over 4 times the required amount. We are providing green infrastructure and habitat that is rich in wildlife resources, including a diverse species mix of wildlife-friendly planting and shrubs, green roofs to all buildings, green walls, bird and bat boxes, and bee houses. In line with industry guidance, we've developed a wildlife-friendly lighting strategy that ensures minimal light disturbance. We've also overachieved urban greening factor with a score of 0.48. All of the above is ensured by way of condition. Energy. The new homes are very close to net zero carbon. By using air source heat pumps, PV panels, and adhering to passive house standards, we've achieved a fantastic score of 87.8%, way ahead of policy target. The scheme has been shaped in its entirety by consultation with the public, neighbours, and officers. We have carried out multiple pre-applications with the urban design, conservation and planning officers. We set up a dedicated public website, distributed letters to 500 local properties, inviting them to online events. We also carried out several one-to-one meetings with our neighbours, allowing them to fully assess the proposals. Numerous adaptations have been implemented following these consultations. In summary, we believe energy efficient family homes and biodiversity should sit side by side. The unique scale of this site, the low density nature of this development provides the opportunity to deliver such a scheme. As developers, we believe we have the responsibility to ensure provision of new homes are met with a sustainable approach and have a positive impact upon the preservation of our natural environment.
30 seconds, Speaker.
All delivered within a 100% policy compliant proposal. Thank you for your time, and I'll try my best to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions, councillors. Councillor John Todd.
Good evening, Ben.
Evening.
I thought I heard that you're saying there's no objection for the Environment Agency or Metis. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if I look at page 118 of the planning report and page 121, which deals with Metis, there are both conditions before they approve.
The Environment Agency hasn't objected. They've just attached some conditions to. Their non-objection, which are standard conditions for building in a flood zone 3A, which is so. The site benefits from flood defences, which is designed to provide 1 in 1,000 a year level of protection. If you're going to design an area to flood, which is basically what a functional floodplain is, which is a zone 3B, we would never try to build in a zone 3B, and you could only have developments which are not housing effectively in those locations. If you have an area of land that's designed to flood 1 in every 20 years, why build a wall in front of it that stops it from flooding other than every 1 in 1,000 years? So when the SFRA, which is a strategic flood risk assessment, said this was functional floodplain 3B, they effectively forgot that there was, or didn't take into account that there was a flood defence wall in front of it that prevents it from flooding in any other time besides 1 in 1,000 years. And then Metis came back to the Environment Agency and said, if you can confirm there's a flood defence in place, we will agree that the most appropriate classification or designation for this site should be should be floodplain 3A. The EA came back and said, we confirm that there's a flood defence wall, and removed their objection.
Well, with respect, I disagree with what you said. There are conditions here, and you haven't met those. Hang on, I don't want to mislead anyone.
Sure.
You heard the previous speaker, who was quite clear.
Yeah.
That things should have been, or may have been done, but hasn't been done. So the question mark hangs over 3A, 3B. So you haven't got a clean audit which says there's no ambiguity that it's 3B or 3A.
So if it's so there's two things. One is whether it's 3B or 3A, and that's related to it being a functional floodplain. Even to build in a 3A, you have to carry out some additional mitigation, which is to, because there's a very low risk still of the flood defences failing, creating a 1 in 100 year event, which is during the lifetime of its development, you need to make sure that the development is safe for its lifetime. So we haven't built any habitable accommodation below 6.2 metres AODN, which means if the site and the unlikely event that it ever flooded, the occupants would simply remain in the home and wait for the event to pass.
Okay, I think we'll agree to disagree on that. You haven't got a unqualified letter from the EA, have you?
I think Matthew might be able to answer that, but the EA clearly removed their objection and agreed with Metis that this should not be treated as a functional floodplain.
Well, Metis agree. Sorry to interrupt, but Metis set conditions. So do you want to make a comment on that, Mr. Matthews, if you want?
Excuse me, just to clarify, we are talking about flooding from the River Thames. That's the remit of the Environment Agency. Metis don't cover on flooding from the River Thames. Metis' involvement in this is that they did the strategic flood risk assessment, they produced it. So the Environment Agency are the pertinent ones in this matter.
Well, I'm still left in the dark. Are there these conditions still applicable that you've published in Appendix 1 and the other Appendix 2?
Is that to me? Sorry again. So just to clarify, condition 1, the development shall be carried out in accordance with the submitted flood risk assessment. So these conditions are basically reassuring that it's undertaken in accordance with the information that's already been submitted. Condition 2, if during further intrusive investigative works, additional improvements or repairs to the defence not previously identified are found to be necessary. So again, these are assuming that the information submitted is acceptable, and on the basis that the information submitted is acceptable, they go on to say that it's basically reassuring what is done is as was submitted.
Okay, but I'm reading in page 118. Based on this, we will be willing to remove our objection to the proposals subject to planning conditions. However, it will be for the local planning authority to decide why the site is designated at flood zone 3B and if this development is appropriate. Now we're going around in circles here.
Yeah, so it is within the strategic flood risk assessment. There's no getting away from the fact that it is designated as flood zone 3B. As part of this application, we're not talking about redesignating it from flood zone 3B. That's not the remit of planning officers. It's not the remit of this planning committee. They are suggesting that we re-review the strategic flood risk assessment to address this point. It is flood zone 3B, but there is obviously this additional material consideration that we have to account for, which is that the strategic flood risk assessment did not correctly account for the defences that are on site currently. So they're suggesting you may want to review 3B because we're not reviewing 3B as part of this current application.
Okay. Can we then deal with the wall, please? Tell me more about your wall.
Sorry, the wall, the flood defence wall?
Yes, the one that sticks out.
So the river defence wall?
River, yes.
Sorry, what do you want to know about it?
Well, were you responsible for the previous application on this site in 2020? No. That's someone else. Okay.
No, nothing to do with us.
Well, the report
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about this one from 1985 that was mentioned earlier.
Previous year, 2020.
Yes, correct. That
It
was us. Yeah.
Well, as I understand it, the report submitted by one of your representatives indicated the wall was in a poor condition and hadn't been examined for some time. What do you say about that?
Visually, the wall looks in a poor condition, but we haven't had the opportunity to fully investigate the wall. As part of one of the conditions before we would start any development on site is to dig down and expose the foundations of the wall and carry out any repair works to that wall to make sure that it is fully functioning as it should be.
So why hasn't that been done?
Because we've been going through the process of trying to achieve planning on site.
But everyone wants reassurance that the wall would do what it's designed to do. And it's safe, secure, and the foundations will stand its current position and additional height.
There's nothing to say that the wall isn't performing as it should be. It's just a condition that before we were to do any form of development on site, that we would have to fully investigate if there was any repairs or any work that was needed to that wall.
Okay, I don't want to labour the point, but there are conditions elsewhere in the report. Intrusive investigation results, page 113, Chair. No part of the development shall commence. Bottom of the page. No part of the development shall commence until the results of the intrusive investigation programme set in the FRA to assess the foundation thickness of concrete, etc., has been submitted to the local planning authority.
Yeah.
So
that's a pre-commencement condition, essentially, that can be
Correct.
added to the planning permission, and we'd have to be done before building works begin on site.
Okay. Can you tell me about the condition of the house? It's a listed house.
It's a locally listed house. Yes, it's in poor condition. There's probably been no maintenance to the property since the 90s. It's got several unsympathetic multiple extensions that seems to have been carried out without permissions or consents. Okay. It's been converted into 2 apartments poorly and lived in, certainly in the top floor apartment, in an uninhabitable condition prior to our purchasing the property. But yes, it's in a very poor condition.
So why have you let it get in its current state?
That's happened before our ownership. We've purchased the property, we've secured it, and we've been going through this process for the last 12 months.
Of what? The application?
Correct, yes.
But you've let the house go rotten?
No, that's
No? Okay.
no.
Well, you've done some maintenance work on the house, have you?
We wouldn't carry out the serious level of work that's required to that house without planning permission.
But it's just a listed house, isn't it?
It's a locally listed house, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's locally listed, so it's a non-designated heritage asset.
Sorry, couldn't hear that. Could you
Sorry,
please
it's
say
a
that again?
Locally listed house, so it's a non-designated heritage asset. There's no kind of statutory protection to the building, but it's recognised as a positive contributor.
Can I go back to your comment? Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you mentioned dead trees. I have no knowledge of the green world, but someone made a comment early on that in crude terms you're going to put 4 houses there and some tanks, and yet your biodiversity report, if that's the right expression, will say you've enhanced the net green effect. I'm struggling for words here, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I don't accept the number of dead trees. I accept there's some very mature trees. Someone suggested there's one tree, a chestnut down by the river, is over 200 years old.
We had agriculturists come to site and review every single tree on site. There's 30 trees within the site. 5 are dead. 19 of category C. So trees are category A, B, C, or
I understand.
So 19 are category C, which is limited lifespans and limited value in terms of amenity value. And when I say limited lifespan, that's less than 20 years. Then there's 6 category B trees, which are of moderate quality, and we're retaining 4 of those. There was an arboriculturist that came down to site as well from the council. They agreed with all the categorizations that we had, besides 1 tree, which is T38, probably the largest tree on site, which is now to be retained. The trees that we're putting in are 8 or 9 years old at the time of planting. It would be, I think, accurate to argue that over the lifetime of the development, the carbon capture from the new trees would be far greater than the existing site. And as trees have died on site, they haven't been replaced, and it would indicate that the trees that are there would also not be.
Okay, I'm getting to the end now. I appreciate your courtesy. Reading the papers, it appears that following your failure to get planning permission on the previous app, you sought pre-planning advice with Hounslow Council.
Correct.
Okay. What flooding level were you given from the council? What did they say the flood zone level was?
So before we purchased the site, we went to the source of information, which is an environment agency, to look at their modelling data for the site, and we employed a consultancy in advance of doing that, Hartington Consulting. They went to the environment agency. They had no history of flooding on the site. They categorised it as a flood zone 3A. All their models supported that. They're obviously aware of the flood defences, and we then purchased the site. It was only during the application process that the Environment Agency spotted that the SFRA designated the site as 3B. And because of that, they just had to object in principle, just automatically. And that was a big shock to us, because we never would have brought a functional flood zone 3B site. Never would have done that. And then it's gone back and forth between them, and the defence wall has been established that it exists, and the level of protection that provides. And then the Environment Agency agreed that it's not a 3B and removed their objection.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Virginia Sidhu.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, is it possible if we can put the plans on the site, all in one drawing, which is on our website?
I can't put the all-in-one drawing up. I can put whichever plan you want to see. Sorry, is it a site plan that you want to see?
Yes, please.
Is that okay?
Sorry, the question needs to be to the applicant, please, rather than to Matthew. Matthew will have his turn in a minute. If you have a question for the officer.
I'll ask the officers.
Yeah,
yes.
So that'll be later then.
Yes.
It's okay, so fine. Okay, anyone got any questions of the applicant, please? Right, I have Councillor Guy Lambert.
Hi. This site is going to need quite a lot of management. It's got pumps and how do you propose that will be managed? Given that I presume the 4 houses will be sold to 4 different owners.
Yeah, so each building will be its own freehold, and then there'll be a communal area which is share of freehold, and there'll be a management scheme put into place which each new owner would sign up to, and that management scheme would then run the communal areas of the site and the communal facilities. Similar to Chiswick Staith next door with their estate management scheme, or any site that has any form of shared facilities.
But Chiswick Staith has got a lot more than 4 houses and probably has a management company, etc., etc.
Yeah, it would be the same.
Be the same, okay. I'm sort of struggling with the question of how close this is to 1 Chiswick Staith, because we see 4.7 meters, and then we hear it's bang up against my wall.
I think
Yeah. So the 4.7 meters refers to the projection beyond the wall of Chiswick Staith, the kind of front wall. So if Chiswick Staith Terrace is facing running north-south, we project east from the east elevation of that by about 4.75 meters. So that's what that number is referring to. The 1.7 is referring to the distance between the kind of main body of our building that projects beyond the face of Chiswick Staith and the boundary wall. The part that connects is about 5 meters deep, and it's set behind the front wall against the flank wall of 1 Chiswick Staith. So if you're looking from Chiswick Staith, 1 Chiswick Staith out from the windows, you would not see the point at which the buildings connect. So there's a small linking element 5 meters deep against the flank wall of Chiswick Staith. But the main body of the building is 1.7 from the boundary.
But are you turning 1 Chiswick Staith into a semi-detached? Well, it probably is a terraced house because it's already
You might say linked detached. There's a small element that would be articulated in glass and timber facade, and then there would be the main brick body of the house, as you can see on the image on the screen there.
Number 1 Chiswick Staith is already a terraced house.
Okay.
But what you would see
It's
is
an end of terrace.
End of terrace. Yeah.
you would see a gap, as you see there, between the buildings to the mature trees on the riverside, between the two above the first floor of 1 Chiswick Staith. And within that 1.7 meter zone, there would also be planting to kind of soften that flank wall.
Okay, so this is a sort of a related point, but you know, we have a policy of having a riverside path, Thames Path. At the moment, there isn't a Thames Path.
We offered that. We offered that by way of legal agreement to provide a future provision for a Thames Path.
No, I don't mean future provision. I mean provision next, you know, when this is built.
When we discussed it with officers, and there's another development a little bit further down the road on Hartington Road.
I know it well.
I'm sure you're aware of it, which creates a dead-end path.
Yes.
And when we talked about, we were happy to provide that. When we talked about it with officers, they thought it was not the best idea, but to offer future provision if it was joined up at either side, then by way of legal agreement, we would have to give that over at any point in time in the future.
Right. I beg to differ with the officers. I mean,
but we can provide that if need be.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Oh, Councillor Mel Collins.
It's just a point of clarification to the answer you gave to the very last point that Councillor Todd made on regards to the trees. We have a policy which is, as I understand it, not for moving. So you said you're going to remove the trees and not replace them. Surely you've come to an agreement whereby you're removing the trees and going to replace them elsewhere.
Correct.
But can you tell us where in that case?
So in terms of quantity, we'll be planting 73 mature trees, an increase of 47 in replacement for the 26 that we're removing. So we're replacing 3 for 1.
So that's on the same site?
Correct, yeah.
Is that okay, Mel? Okay. I'm just checking, is there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll now move on to the officers with the report. Okay, over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So I will go back over the slides, even though we've reviewed them briefly as part of the presentation. So if you excuse me, I'll reverse. Back to the start. So I will first linger on this only briefly because it's just showing where 17 Hartington Road is, but it gives a good idea of the greening within the back garden, its proximity to the River Thames, and obviously that's Chiswick Staith just to the south of the site. It's number 19 Hartington Road to the north of the site. We've got a better picture, so I'll come back to that. This is 17 Hartington Road. As already suggested, it's a locally listed building, currently subdivided into 2 flats, and you can see the access route on the right, pitch to the right-hand side that would lead to the properties to the rear. Some street view views of Hartington Road and 17 Hartington Road. And then we're onto the boundary with 19 Hartington Road. This is a view from where the houses would be back up to 17 Hartington Road. So as has already been pointed out, you can see there's quite a steep slope back up to the property there. And then an elevated view showing some of the trees, and the case officers pointed out which trees to be retained as part of this proposal. And then views back down towards the where the houses would be located and looking back at Chiswick Staithe. Moving on, so this is the side wall of number 1 Chiswick Staithe, as we've been talking about, and other properties within Chiswick Staithe. And then a view towards it from the river wall and some other garden views. And then these are across the River Thames towards where the application site is. So you can see the river wall there, you can see the flood defences, you can see Chiswick Staithe and where it would look, how it would look in the context of the river view. And again, Chiswick Staithe. So this is the proposal. That you can see from the plans that there is an access route that runs to the northern side of the property down towards the back of the dwellings. You can clearly see the landscaping. So the section to the front of the site is for 17 Hartington Road, the properties it would be up until where you can see the turning point in the access road, and then anything to the rear of that is serving the application, the proposed 4 new units. These are in detailed plans of the 4 properties. So this is a lower ground floor plan, and there's no habitable accommodation here. This is for the 4 car parking spaces and utilities. And then you can see the rear gardens. And then moving up to the ground floor plan is where you have the living and dining room areas. And then moving up, you have the bedrooms up through to the 2nd floor, and then the roof plan. So this is the elevation looking to the rear. So you can see number 1 Chiswick Staithe there to the left-hand side. You can see how it would be linked to it at lower ground floor level, and then there is a degree of separation at upper floor level. You also get an idea of what the properties would look like. So they are set below the upper line, the top of 1 Chiswick Staithe. They've been designed to be semi-detached to allow views through to the river. Then this is the southwest rear elevation. So this is the rear elevation, sorry. So that was actually the front elevation, apologies. Rear elevation. And then the side elevation and the other side elevation. And then just quickly, the refurbishment to the existing house, it has got a number of existing extensions to the rear which are being demolished, and we view this as overall as an improvement to the extensions on the property. It's a kind of an ad hoc mixture of properties which would be knocked down, and then there will be a single story extension, outbuilding and rear dormer proposed. And then the landscaping plans, I'm sorry, they're going to be too small for you to read exactly what's said, but I'll come on to landscaping shortly anyway. Some more in detailed landscaping plans. And then finally, I have got on the screen, this is the letter from the Environment Agency confirming they had no objection to it, but I believe this is in the addendum to the report anyway. So this is a copy, the addendum to the report has a copy of this. So if I talk about the pertinent issues, if that's okay, obviously the biggest one is the flooding issue. So first of all, obviously apologies for any misunderstanding that's resulted from this. I'll split it into 2 parts. Firstly, I'll talk about flooding from rain, from surface water flooding, and this is something that Metis, the lead local flood authority, are the statutory consultees on. So they comment on flooding from rain runoff. So what happens is that we ensure that the proposal as designed has greenfield runoff rates. So essentially, when it rains, the rain will be retained on the site. It will infiltrate into some retention tanks underground, and then it's discharged slowly from these tanks. And what they have to do is they have to do all of the calculations attached to how much runoff, how much infiltration will be based on when it rains, and demonstrate to us that there won't be any excess water exiting the site during these significant rainfall events. And they have done that. That has been accepted by the lead local flood authority. Flooding from the river is the area that has been discussed at length. So this is the Environment Agency are the statutory consultees on flooding from the river. So as I briefly discussed with Councillor Todd, It is in the strategic flood risk assessment as flood zone 3B, which is where the concerns originally came from the Environment Agency. The strategic flood risk assessment was done by Metis, so that's where they get involved in the situation. So application submitted, Environment Agency look at the strategic flood risk assessment and see it's a flood zone 3B and raise objections to the application on that basis. Now, as has been discussed, subsequently it was demonstrated that there are flood defences. So the Environment Agency have taken a view that there's a 1 in 100 year risk of flooding for this site, which would make it a flood zone 3A, which is still at the higher end of the risk category, and it does require a certain amount of tests to take place, but it is different to a flood zone 3B, which I think it's probably fair to say if this was a flood zone 3B, it wouldn't have the same recommendation on the application. But the tests have been carried through. They're the exhaustion tests and sequential tests, and it is based on broadly based on housing needs, suggesting that there is reason to build on flood zone 3A. Now, there is another area of this that has to be looked at, because it's not just flood risk, it's what to do in the event of flooding. So there is still a risk of flooding, albeit a reduced one, and they have to design the properties in a manner that minimises the risk to residents within these properties, and that's why you can see the proposed lower ground floor doesn't have any habitable accommodation. So this is the basis for all of the habitable accommodation is over a certain level that's been assessed as part of the flood risk assessment. So in the rare event of the site flooding, acknowledging there is risk to it, they have demonstrated to us that there would be minimal risk to the occupants of these properties by virtue of this flood risk assessment. So to note, rainwater flooding, they have demonstrated that rainwater would not exit the site through their attenuation tanks and infiltration into those tanks. And flooding from the river, they have demonstrated that there are flood risk assessment defences, and they have taken steps to design the properties in a manner that would minimise risk in the event of flooding happening. It has been robustly tested. The applicants have been down and assessed the site. The Environment Agency also undertake their own assessments of flood defences, and they found this to be of sound quality. So they've tested it, and they haven't taken an issue with the defences. Some of them came out as poor. There's been stories about that across the country. These aren't one of those ones that were found to be poor by the Environment Agency. But as I say, there's conditions attached to the report that require further explanatory works, which wouldn't be done at this stage. We wouldn't ask that to be done at that stage because it's quite intrusive. Works that needs to be undertaken to explore that. But notwithstanding that, were members to approve the scheme tonight, you would have the conditions that make sure that what is shown to you tonight being presented by the applicants takes place. I hope that's okay. Obviously, I'll take any questions that anyone wants to pose on that point. It's come up, it is in a conservation area. The reason that you have a positive recommendation for this application, which proposes houses in the rear garden, is in part because it is a continuation of that property line on Chiswick Staith. So it's not just isolated houses within a rear garden. They have taken steps to continue that line. And also, obviously, this is a much larger rear garden than properties to the north of the site. So there isn't that risk of them continuing the properties further up the line. So that's the reason why we didn't take any strong issues with the actual design of the scheme and the location of the properties within the rear garden. Trees has been discussed, 26 removed, 73 replaced. I'm going to be talking about urban greening factor and biodiversity net gain increasingly during planning committees, because these are things that are coming in and becoming more prominent. Urban greening factor and biodiversity net gain, they are essentially a substantive list of criteria that need to be met to make sure that the development's okay. So it's not longer a case that we'll knock down 2 trees and give you 3 more. That's not the test that we're measuring them against. There's a whole list of criteria which I would happily be expand upon it if need be at any future date. But just to clarify that they have demonstrated to us that there is a biodiversity net gain, and it meets an urban greening factor that complies with the London plan. Sorry to introduce those new phrases at this point. So in terms of biodiversity and trees, we believe it to be acceptable as well.
Sorry, Matthew, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I could not find that letter from the Environment Agency, therefore nobody on the planning committee has seen it. It would be good to go back to that, please, if that's possible.
It is on screen, but it is,
yeah,
I believe...
It's not in the addendum.
It's
not in the addendum, because I've just gone through the addendum, and it's not even in the other package.
So it is...
So could you read that out to everybody, because obviously we've not seen that.
It's...
And I'm concerned that people who are querying this, and I know certainly Councillor John Todd has already raised this with me and with yourself. So I would like you to read that out so you can actually, so everyone can hear what they are saying, please. Thank you.
Sure. So this is word for word from Appendix 1 within the office report. So this is page 118 of not the addendum. This is page 118 of the agenda. Leo has written out word for word what the letter states. But I will.
Sorry, so you're looking at page 118.
I think so, sorry.
Sorry, the big problem was that looks like an official letter, and what he's done is
He's just
taken it
copied it.
out and he's quoting it.
Yeah.
And is that all of the letter in there, or is that part of the letter?
It's all the letter that he's pasted into this, so including the conditions that they offer in. So I've got the front page. There's a second page. The second page goes on to list the conditions. So he's got all of the letter within his report.
Okay, is that, sorry, Councillor John Todd, does that make sense to you? Sorry.
No, and it's annoying that we haven't seen the letter previously. But the point I'll make, sorry to be difficult. Yeah, the detail, Matthew, it talks about a further intrusive investigation. The last section will be undertaken to confirm the residual life of flood events, as lined in Appendix A66A. Well, who knows what that is?
Yeah, we don't. It's not an unusual condition for them to attach to say undertake these further investigative works, but it is on the proviso that if they do find issues with it, that's repairable, and they would have to do that as part of the condition for the planning application. Excuse me.
Well, that's an easy one. Listen.
Sorry, John, hold on. He hasn't finished his report yet. I interrupted him because I couldn't find it. I was under the impression, I knew that they had said this in the report somewhere, but I wasn't sure because it didn't look like the letter. Okay. I wasn't sure how much of that letter that Leo had, sorry, this is the planning officer who's actually responsible for the report. I wasn't sure how much of it he'd quoted. Okay. But if he's quoted the entire letter, that's fine by me. So if you want to carry on from where you got to with when we're starting to work about on the biodiversity bit, where we're taking out those trees and replacing them. And as we've got it, you got to 73 mature, 70, they're not mature trees, they are young trees. They're 8 to 9 years old. I'm just going to clarify that so that we're all on the same page. Yeah. So we go from there, please.
Thanks, Councillor. So the only other thing I was going to point out, the other thing that was coming up is impact on 1 Chiswick Estate. So I'm hoping the plans on the screen broadly show what the impact's going to be. So yes, lower ground floor and ground floor, as you can hopefully see from the bottom of these plans, is as good as attached to 1 Chiswick Estate. So there are no side-facing windows within 1 Chiswick Estate that are impacted upon here. So it's when we talk about habitable rooms, they're the front and rear facing windows. And then when we talk about those distances, it's the projection beyond the front of 1 Chiswick Estate. So you can see that on this plan, the bottom house projects beyond the front of 1 Chiswick Estate. So that's where the concern over impact on light and impact on visual intrusion comes from, that projection beyond the front. But as I've mentioned, it does have this separation from that property, which is why it passes a daylight and sunlight test. I'm happy to leave it there. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so Councillor John Todd.
How am I supposed to know what appendix contains?
Yeah, sorry, it does rely on you reading the original flood risk assessment submitted with this application, which is publicly available. But it's in there. So they've read that, they've agreed with it, they've agreed that that's an appropriate approach to this application, and then added the conditions to say you need to do what your flood risk assessment is saying you'll do.
Okay, can I have I got free range now? Good. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for your help, by the way. I acknowledge that. Yeah. I want to come back to the applicants made by these people to get a guidance with planning conditions. Was flood zones ever mentioned in that dialogue?
Sorry, Councillor, you spoke off mic for a short period there. Excuse me.
Apologise. Okay. What do you call it? Pre-planning. They had a pre-planning review. Sorry.
Sorry, I get you now. As part of their pre-planning, they actually came in and armed from advice from the Environment Agency. So when they come in and have pre-planning advice with us, we don't go through the process of discussing it with statutory consultees. There is, if there's an issue like flood risk as part of pre-planning advice, you just add the caveat that either it's subject to the Environment Agency's comments or we would suggest you approach the Environment Agency separately for pre-planning advice. So they wouldn't get that advice from us. But as I say, they approached the Environment Agency and they submitted that as part of their application.
How do you know they approached the?
They had, so the original flood risk assessment has information from the Environment Agency in it. So there must have been some kind of engagement. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how that was.
I'm just asking, and did that touch on the status?
That wasn't raised as an issue at the time. So reading through the original flood risk assessment and the correspondence with Environment Agency at the time, it looks like this came up when the Environment Agency were consulted on this current planning application. It wasn't a reason for refusal in previous planning applications, the one last year, so it clearly didn't come up at that time.
Okay, so when I look at the reasons for refusal for the December 20 application, it says that proposed dwellings in the rear garden in 17 Huntington Road, by reason of their bulky, dominant and incongruous design, will be an intrusive development out of scale and character, failing to maintain and enhance the appearance and character of this conservation area, contrary to the policies. What's new?
So they've redesigned them. So this is where the they've now separated them into two as you're looking at it at the moment. So they've redesigned them to create that views through to the river, that they've come down, and we believe it's an overall and improved design that's been presented to us as this application. And apologies for not having the drawings to the original application up on the screen in front of me.
Okay. With that same application, which was refused, there was an alteration in the street frontage of number 17 and the unsightly addition of a new widened access road to the site, which again appears on this application. The delegated planner's office's report for the refusal planning permission identified this as regrettable from a visual amenity perspective, particularly given that the house will be sandwiched between two roads on either side, and in terms of the impact of the overall street scene from the loss of soft landscaping. Why have you changed your mind on that?
The access roads is still there, but it's weighing material considerations, councillors. I know I keep saying this, sorry, but that locally listed building is being converted back to a single dwelling. It's having a lot of alterations from the rear removed. There's a lot of improvements that are taking place for it. So if you're taking a balancing view as to whether or not that there's harm to this building of Townsgate Merit, we come out on the side that there isn't harm overall as a result of this development.
Okay, you're very. My final one is building in rear gardens and the conservation aspect. I'd like you to address that. I think Tony, whose name escapes me, I apologise, made a very powerful case that the Victorian gardens of that size were compatible with that house. It's a unique site. The conservation report really did highlight how important that style of house was to that area, both in setting and its interaction with the rest of the properties. And to wrench out the garden and the other related matters is a fine line between reckless and destructive. I'm giving you the opportunity to respond to that, if conservation means conservation.
Yeah, thank you, guys. You're completely right to test us on that point. Our policy in terms of development in rear gardens only resists it in the event of conflicting with other policies within the local plan. So we're looking at this, looking at see if there are any is conflict with other policies in the local plan. And its design, it's fair to say. So as I think I've mentioned before, it wouldn't have had this positive recommendation if it was looked at in isolation. But when you look at it as part of the whole riverscape, townscape there, because it's a continuation of those units and not viewed in isolation as you generally expect from a rear garden development, it doesn't have the impact that policy seeks to prevent. You'll also note that there's a significant sloping down, so it's clearly subservient to the properties at the back. It's not impacted on the host properties either, which is the reasoning behind that policy.
Okay, thank you. My final question is this. We've had some very cosy dialogue between the EA, Mattis and others and members, and the public have been excluded. So I feel very strongly about the grading given. But there's no arena I can go to or the public to go and give their case and demonstrate the strength or weakness of the arguments being put forward. And it's worse than that, really, because there was correspondence, I'm not going to say withheld, but slow to go in the public domain. Let's be kind to you. How can anyone make representations to make sure they're involved in that agenda?
Well, I mean, that's a planning process in general. You're relying on the case officer to robustly test the conversations that take place, which we believe we have done. I mean, I've been privy to the conversations and I have tested them on the comments that they've made. It's a planning system that has consultation, and as part of the consultation you consult statutory consultees as well as neighbours as part of that 3-week period. It's not designed to then allow residents to engage in dialogue with statutory consultees. Whether or not you see that as a shortcoming in the planning system, I understand that, but the Environment Agency aren't going to respond to individual questions from local residents, I'm afraid to say, just through capacity concerns. So yeah, you're relying on officers to take a robust approach to it and test them on that.
Do you think LBH Planning Department made the appropriate effort to communicate with the public who wanted to object?
So I mean, I do. It's not for the public to test the Environment Agency's advice. Essentially, that's not built into the planning system. So when we receive a letter, that's meant to be something for us to consider. So when we receive expert advice, that's for officers to consider alongside the public's view that's taken on those matters. Obviously, we're in a situation where there's general public are, sorry to call you general public, residents are engaging with their own professional advisors. How much weight do you attach to that? It has to be, you allocate weight to it in accordance with how you see fit as members. But the Environment Agency obviously are the experts, they're the statutory consultees, and they are impartial in this matter. So we have to afford great weight to their advice, and they are experts. So yes, I think that's what we have to say as planning officers.
Okay, so we'll go back to Councillor Rajvinder Sidhu, because you wanted to ask a question of the officer, and then I'll take Councillor Tony Lukey.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, my question is regarding the back gardens. How long roughly the gardens are, which we are getting from the riverbank?
Oh, sorry, Councillor, I don't have that. I know it's in here somewhere, because that's I think that's one of the conditions that is specified by the Environment Agency in their letter. Setback 16 metres from the River Thames, does it? Its main river. So yeah, in excess of
60 meters.
Yeah.
Thank you.
16, sorry if I've got that wrong. 16 meters.
16.
Just 16. Yeah, sorry to clarify.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Tony Lukey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to. I made a note of it when it was being discussed or when it was being raised by the objectors and also by the applicant, and just now with Councillor Todd, and head of development there. Looking at this Appendix 1 there on page 118, and it's been referred to on a couple of occasions, the objectors are saying the objectors and their advisors, their professional advisors, are referring to a 3B, a 1 in 20-year flood here, and we know that it does flood, and we know that the wall that is there is not going across the it's not going across the garden at the back. It's not going fully across the garden at the back. So we've got a 1 in 20 from the objectors. We've got 1 in 100 years from the officer over there, and we've got 1 in 1,000 years from the applicant, who would probably, if he had the chance, would like it to be 1 in 1,500 years. But that's another, that's just me being cheeky. But where are we with this, and why are, picking up on Councillor Todd's question, why are we being allowed to, as it suggests in that in the 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph there in Appendix 1 Environment Agency response letter, it will be for the local planning authority to decide why the site is designated as flood zone 3B. You know, when did we become the you know, when did we become the authority on this, on these matters? You know, why would it be down to us to do that, a local authority to do that, without referring it back to public consultation, to public awareness that it is potential? The other thing that I want to know from the officers is a couple of things. Why is this being, you know, why are four large houses being considered as part of the borough house, you know, house building target? But the other thing I want to know from officers is why there are so many, particularly in pertaining to flooding, why there are so many conditions we've been asked to decide on a number of conditions that have not been that are contentious at the moment with regards to flooding, when they should really be very clear, because of the uncertainty over what we are what this area is, whether it's 3A or 3B. Why can't we wait and decide this until another time, when we have got those real facts, particularly as we know that the developer themselves have confirmed that they haven't checked the flood wall, for example. There's a lot of contention here that we're not, you know, we're being asked to decide on a number of things that we've got no certainty on. They're up in the air at the moment. Now that's why I'm feeling quite concerned about this, that we're not being we're being asked to decide this way.
Okay, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So why we consider all houses as so basically we've got a policy which seeks to maximise housing provision. All new homes count towards that policy. That's the only answer I can really give to that. So it's not just affordable housing that we're seeking to retain. It's all new houses we're meant to maximise housing within the borough where appropriate. So I'm gonna put words in people's mouths if this is okay. First of all, 1 in 20 flood risk is generally what you would associate. Sorry, 1 in 20 year flood risk is generally what you associate with flood zone 3B. So I think this is what's coming from the objectors. So they've got the 1 in 20 years because it's got the designation as 3B. I'm assuming that they're saying that that's why it's a 1 in 20 year flood risk. The applicant is saying 1 in 1,000 years is because it's meant to be what you get from the Thames barrier. You're meant to get 1 in 1,000 years protection. We have settled with the advice from the Environment Agency, going back to them being the experts and the impartial party, to suggest it's a flood zone 3A. I understand your point about why are we, sorry.
Chair, they're not saying that. They're saying that at the moment it's 3B, and it's up to us as a local authority to decide whether it should be 3B. Well, you know, why is it down to us to decide it without consultation, without discussion with other people, neighbours, and it's not just here. If we're going to discuss 3Bs, why don't we look at all flood? Why don't we look at all 3As elsewhere and see whether they're all 3Bs across the borough?
So the reason they refer to us is because the lead local flood authority does it. So that's Metis. So that's why they refer it back to local authority. I just need to be clear on the point that. So what they refer it back to the local authority, the lead local flood authority. So that's Metis. So it's not planners, it's the people we contract, the lead local flood authority. They're the people that.
In that paragraph, it says the local planning authority. We are the local planning authority.
So just to clarify, we don't do the strategic flood risk assessment. The local there is a strategic flood risk assessment that is adopted. We haven't done that. That's not done by. So that's wrong. It's not us that make a decision whether it's flood zone 3A or 3B. We can't do that. We don't have that information in front of us. So
hang on. Matthew, one of the things that is a concern, I think, we're subtly hearing, Metis is supposed to be about surface water, not flooding. So it can't be referred back to Metis as the flood authority. Surely that's us. Or the lead local flood authority is Metis. Therefore, they must be able to do both surface water and flooding. Whereas we've been told that it's well, I've always understood the Environment Agency is like well, I'm not going to say God because I wouldn't use that, but you know what I mean? That's the highest authority in the land, and that's what we all look to. So when there was huge flooding in Somerset, it was the Environment Agency that got condemned for not having done dredging and various other things, and then they got on with doing that. And I'm taking it out of London because, you know, that's what, and we all knew that was what the Environment Agency did. It wasn't any local planning authority. So we're now getting in a bit of a cleft stick here because it's getting less clear as we go through this. And this is what worries me at the moment, because I'm suddenly going, hang on a minute, I thought I had this clear in my head, that the Environment Agency had withdrawn any objections, but had laid down a load of conditions that had to be done. And mostly, lots of those conditions have to be done prior to any building going on. But what happens if the developer finds that the wall isn't sufficient and therefore has to make a lot of money? I mean, I know how much these walls cost because we had to deal with the one in Strand on the Green, didn't we? And that cost, and that was many years ago, that cost the council kind of zillions of, well, millions anyway. No, I don't know about zillions, but millions anyway. So we know it's really expensive. So I'm just now very confused as to which planning authority are they talking about? Are they talking about us as the local planning authority? Or are they, or is this a strange, or is, that's why I wanted to know if this was the exact wording of that letter, or it was something that had been taken, if there's a sentence or something not there, because it doesn't make sense to me now reading it. That's what I'm worried about. So can you clarify that for us?
So there is a section of this letter that says, based on this, we would be willing to remove our objections to the proposal subject to planning conditions. So they've removed their objection. So they do not object to this planning application.
Hold on.
So they're not objecting to this planning application, Councillor. I think that's got to be the point that we're making here, that they have no objections to this planning application as the statutory consultee, that they're not objecting to the scheme. That's pretty, that's got to be pertinent to this decision-making process.
Chair, you know, I'm arguing, the planning officer is arguing with me when I'm picking out one part of this this letter, which blatantly refers to the local authority, the local planning authority, and he's choosing another bit that suits his argument. You know, this report that's come here, and we do it often. Premature reports for planning. We do it from time to time, and this is not ready for decision. And if we had a chance, I know Councillor Gerrard has indicated. Sorry, and I'm not trying to hog this, but if, you know, we should defer this or defer or refuse it. Let it come back again, because this is something a number of us around this table today do not feel comfortable in making a decision on. And I'm sure the lawyer is going to come up with some other reason, or the planning officer will come up for a reason. But we are the planning authority. We are the quasi-judicial authority here.
Okay, hang on a second. Can I just check on what? Sorry, Councillor Gary.
Chair, there have been many questions asked by my colleagues, and the answers have been going around in circles. So, Matthew, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I only want the answer in yes and no. The first question is this development in a conservation area, yes or no?
Yes, it is, Councillor.
Thank you. The second question is this a flood risk zone 3B? Yes or no?
It is designated as I can't. No, sorry, Councillor. I've explained this at length. It is in a flood risk zone 3B, but
hang on, Matthew. Page 118 says it is.
It is.
3B.
You need to look behind this. This is what I'm saying. It is in flood risk CB. That is not correct.
See, the thing is, we cannot make our answers according to a choice. The letter from the Environment Agency says zone 3B. Either it is or it is not. I want an answer yes or no.
Yes, that's not a fair question. Sorry, Councillor.
Okay, I'll go to the next question then. The next question is whether this will be a risk, or whether there will be a risk of flooding still there, yes or no?
There will be a, yes, 100 a year.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move the motion for this application to be refused.
Oh, right, okay. Well, in that case, I have on the table refusal. I'd like to see all those in favour of refusal, please, would you? Sorry, hang on a minute.
Sorry, could we be clear about planning reasons to refuse this application before we have any vote? Yeah, I think we need to be clear and then hear from the planning officer in relation to those reasons that members are giving.
Okay.
That would be defendable at any appeal.
Okay.
I think we need to be clear
thing
about
is-
that before, rather than refuse on the basis of his designation or not designation.
Okay, well, so what we basically had prior to you moving refusal was it seemed to me that Councillor Tony Luca was going to probably move towards deferral, but we'll hold on to that for the moment. Can we go through the reasons, the planning reasons why you wish to refuse this? So,
The reasons which I have given are in fact planning reasons.
Yeah.
There is no hard and fast rule on that this should be a planning reason. It's common sense, and common sense should prevail.
right, so what you're saying, hold on a minute, what you have to say, sorry. If you're going to say that it is to do with the designation of this being according to the Environment Agency's letter,
That's correct.
why, because it says it would be for the local planning authority to decide why the site is designated as flood zone 3B and if this development is appropriate. Now, what you're saying is because we're not clear, well, no, because yes, the planning committee is not clear whether this is zone 3B or 3A, whatever arguments have been gone on, people sitting around this table today, I've already registered like at least 6 people nodding their heads saying they are not clear whether it's 3B or 3A. So in other words, that has to be revisited whatever happens. So that's got to be looked at, which might be the deferral bit, but it might not be. That's up to you. You're also saying that you're not happy with the fact that they're attached to one Chiswick Staith. Is that correct?
No, this development is in a conservation area, and we are going
And it
against
shouldn't
the
be in a conservation area.
conservation rules.
Right, so it's because of it's in a conservation area and don't agree with it. Okay.
So that's slightly that's quite a big subject there, Councillor. Is it the design and the impact on the conservation area? Is there a particular issue that you're looking at?
Yeah.
Is impacting the conservation? Is it detracting from the conservation area?
Could you give me a solid reason? You're a planning officer. You've been a planning officer for so long.
No, sorry. Can I say it's not for the planning officers? Members have recommended are potentially going to recommend a refusal. It's for members to come up with those reasons. It's Matthew's job to make comment on those and put it in a more professional context.
So,
But
Mr. Walsh,
members have to be clear. Members have to come
Okay,
up with reasons.
Hang on a minute. Councillor Guy Lambert. You're going to go for the design stuff, I suspect, knowing you.
It's not going to be design, no.
No, okay.
It's the principle of building in this garden.
So in the back, it's the background.
Personally, I don't believe that the necessity to build has been established in a place where it's, as I understand it, it's generally against policy to build in gardens. Okay, you say it's a big garden and there's no other big gardens around. You also say they won't build in the next garden. Well, I would submit that if I was selling number 21, whichever the next garden is, I'd be talking to these guys and saying, put another one in there, another couple in there. We can get a nice terrace going along here, because you've got the access via your thing, and you've covered all these waste and recycling stuff that actually doesn't work. I mean, sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah, that's okay. Hold on a second. Right, Councillor John Todd.
Yeah, I hope I can help. I'm reading a report submitted by the Objectors. When looking at the proposed landscaping plans, the overall result of the proposed development will be substantial and irreversible damage to the current rich biodiversity of a mature garden that has been largely undisturbed for decades and enjoys complete darkness at night. This proposals are contrary to policy GB7.
Okay, so that's one. Councillor Tony Lukey, were you going to say something else? I thought you.
Look, I will say it, but we get this often from the legal advisors, or say you tell us what the reasons are. We're giving you a broad reason broad reasons for our refusals. You're the professionals, you're the lawyers, and you put our words into Sorry, you're going to start disagreeing with me, but that's my prerogative here. We tell you what we think. We perhaps can't articulate it as well as you can, and you should probably be able to decipher Councillor Gerwal's reasons there. But Councillor Guy Lambert has given you good reasons now. Councillor John Todd has given you good reasons, and I would say it's inappropriate, and I would also say it's an inappropriate design for a conservation area, and it's an inappropriate and intensive design for the conservation area, and also officers have not really delivered here on this report either. And that's not a planning reason. That's not something that's going to go to the inspector. But I'd like to record that we are again. We've seen some others before this calendar year, where applications have been premature as well. And yeah, I'm not going to go any further there. There are people here who know what I'm talking about.
That's fine. Thanks. Thank you very much, Councillor Tony Lukey. I think as well we have had in the past when we've actually come up with a refusal, Jimmy, we've actually had the officers say, don't worry, we know what you basically mean and we will put it into terms. So I think that, so I'm sorry, but you know, I'm the chair, so I'm going to say, I know I'm taking your legal advice, thank you, but I'm saying as the chair, I'm going to say, I actually do think our officers are going to have to help us a bit with this and make sure that we are not making an incorrect, because we've told you what the committee, and I think I've looked around the room and is like, there's lots of nods around. People are genuinely confused over the 3A, 3B bit and whether the Environment Agency is telling us that we've got to do something. And we're saying, look, somebody's made a mistake here somewhere. And I don't think it's down to the planning committee to have to make a judgment on that, because that's going beyond, I think, our brief, even as a quasi-judicial whatever, and we will need some significant help from our planning officers, our expertise in yourself and them. So therefore, we will go, I think, I mean, having taken on board what you're saying, and I understand your concern, of course I do. I'm more than aware of those concerns as well. I wouldn't be doing my job as chair without being concerned about it, but I can see the weight of the feeling of the committee, and I've got to reflect that as well. Councillor Mel Collins, have you got something?
Yeah, it's something that's, it's to do with this, but and I'm not quite sure whether we have done it in the past, but I think things have changed. But I gather from what we've heard this evening and the correspondence that we've had hitherto that there is a very strong argument around this application that there was no, or there was a lack of meaningful consultation with the residents in the area, which has forced them to go to another avenue to get the evidence that they needed to make a judgment one way or the other. And I think it's the lack of consultation here has been paramount as to why we've spent God knows how long tonight to get to where we are.
Right. I think there may be two sides to that one, because I have gone through with the officers how much consultation the officer Leo Hall did over this in comparison to what this is supposed to be. I know it's got a lot of concerns, but it is only a minor application in comparison to our major applications. Therefore, there are certain different rules. However, I think we've got enough on the table to move to a vote on refusal. I've got Councillor Gary Gurrell has proposed that. Councillor Harleen here has seconded it. So, Matthew, can you say something? Okay, thank you.
So, Councillor Siddle had conservation area and flood risk. Councillor Lambert, principle of development in the rear garden, and then Councillor Lukey, inappropriate design, intrusive development, and then Councillor Todd, biodiversity, GB7. So, what I'm suggesting is that the conservation area and principle of building in the garden, they're kind of going to be linked in, sorry, an inappropriate design and intrusive design. That's kind of wrapped into one design refusal. So it's inappropriate backland development within a conservation area. I hope that's okay to wrap it into one reason for refusal. And then you can say, yes, it's intrusive, it's overbearing, it's detracting from the character of the area. So if that's okay, I'm suggesting that's one reason for refusal. The flood risk one, we've obviously had at length. Our recommendation is that it shouldn't be a reason for refusal. Members would either go for, we want to refuse it on grounds it's a flood zone 3B and therefore there's undue risk to flooding the area, or it could be on the grounds of prematurity, that it hasn't been sufficiently researched, so it hasn't been demonstrated to members that this isn't at risk of flooding. I would definitely favour the second one because, as I say, the Environment Agency are satisfied that this isn't the flood zone 3B. So that's the one that I favour, but obviously that's up to members to go for as well. So design, conservation area backland development, and flood risk, whichever one you feel is more appropriate. There is genuine flood risk, or it hasn't been demonstrated there isn't flood risk.
Councillor Tony Lukey.
Chair, yes, and we've got to get conservation area in there as well, Matthew. Let's not leave any. Let's not leave that one out.
Okay, you all right with that?
Sorry, I thought I'd said that. So yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go to the vote on the refusal, okay, and then what we need is a guidance as to which of whether we're going to go for the confusion, as it were, on flood 3A or 3B, and who is supposed to determine that, because the Environment Agency obviously have withdrawn their objection, but what we're not sure about is who it stays with. Does it stay with the Environment Agency, or is it down to us, or is it down to our officers? It's confusing. Gary.
Chair, in that case, where the confusion is, from next time, whatever has to be brought to this committee should be thoroughly investigated and clarified. When we have wasted a lot of time tonight.
Okay.
I'm not coming here to waste my time.
No. Okay, that's fine. Okay, right. So we're going to move to the vote, please. Can I see all those in favour of refusal, please? Right, Holden, can you just keep your hands up so I can check? I've got 5 there, 6, 7, that's all. You didn't need that. That's everybody. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, right. I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. Okay, and then come back. Thank you very much. And I just thank you all for attending. Okay, I'm just waiting for, no, I'm not. Right, okay, can we all come back together again, please, people? Colleagues? And thank you very much, Councillor Mel Collins. Okay, right. Now we are back online. First thing we're going to do, please, is to suspend standing orders. So can I have that, please? Thank you very much. That's dealt with. Excellent. Thank you. Is it?
Chair, we have raised this before with the head of Democratic Services and even the leader of the council, I believe, and we're still being shortchanged here. We're coming to these meetings and the freshwater machine's not working, and there's insufficient supplies. I don't know where I got this cup of tea from. I think the tea lady was still on duty, but. Yeah, this really needs to be passed back, Wendy. And
I'll actually refer that back to our chief whip. All right.
Well, where's he been? Where's he been?
Well, we all know.
Holiday home abroad, is it? All right. Yeah.
Careful,
Yeah, not Butlins,
Tony. We're on.
Tony, that's personal.
Come on.
Is it? Shh. Don't know.
Right, wherever people have been during the holidays is completely up to them, as long as it's not in a risque or if there are any anymore. I don't think there are any anymore, are there? Okay, here we go. Right, so I've just referred that to the Chief Whip to have a word. And you know when our next meeting is in February, so that gives you 3 weeks or so to get that.
No problem. I'll do that.
I'm not so sure about sandwiches, but as long as we've got some tea and coffee, please, that would be great. And fresh water, please. I'm okay because I brought mine anyway. But anyway, so, okay, let's move on. The next item is 4 Leighton Court, Brentford. We were to have somebody objecting. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it. We did give them the opportunity to ask someone to step in to their place. And unfortunately, no one's come forward. So we'll now move to the officer's report. Okay, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we're in Brentford Ward. This is the Leighton Court, Brook Lane North. It's a proposal for a 3-storey property with 6 affordable rent properties within. It's similar to a couple of schemes you've seen before. It's a garage site, which the garage is to be removed, and this 3-storey building put in its place. So I'll run through the slides briefly. Actually, sorry, I'll go back to just to give you an idea of the site itself. The garages are just above where it says Leighton Court, and not the building straight above it. To the north of that side is the block of garages to be removed, and you're looking at it there. So this is the access to the site. So this is the access road into the garage area. You're looking at the garage just to the right of this photo. To the left are properties which I've forgotten its name, sorry, I'll come back to that in a second. There you go. So Brook Lodge Court, so this is looking west, with the garages on the right hand side looking towards Brook Lodge Court and 47 to 52 Leighton Road. This is now looking north. You're looking at an industrial building. The industrial building is located right behind where the new properties would be located. And then hopefully this site plan shows a little bit more information. So where it's marked 1, right in the centre of that picture is the new building, Brook Lodge Court to the west, and then Brook Lane North to the east. This is a detailed site plan showing the amenity space layout of the properties and where the cycle parking will be located. And then now we're moving up. So this is the proposed first floor plan and the proposed second floor plans showing these 6x2 bedroom properties and an elevation. So it's been designed to be in keeping with surrounding buildings, to be of a similar scale to the properties to the east of the sites. And there's a proposed 3D view. So it has a 92% carbon reduction over Part L, which is a very good for this type of scheme. It meets internal and external space standards. There are no trees lost. There's 2 trees planted. There's no one speaking tonight. I'm going to actually quickly run back through the objections that we received just to make sure that we've given time to the people that would have spoken. Excuse me.
That's okay. Just so you know, there is part of the addendum report, first page, you've got some corrections and amended, a couple of them conditions amended, which are, if you haven't seen them, please do glance over them, because I do think it actually clarifies a couple of the objections that Matthew will go through, but that does clarify some of the situation. So just so you are aware.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Loss of presume, loss of outlook have been raised. No properties fail a light test. There are separation distances retained. There is the issue of outlook from the balconies east and west, but we've endeavoured to resolve that through planning condition to ensure that appropriate screening is in place. I think probably that the crux of the matter is car parking, spaces for existing residents and loss of car parking. There will be some displacement from the loss of garages onto the surrounding node wetwork. We are relying on the fact that it's a controlled parking zone around the site, and this would be controlled as well. So that would that's what would control the overall parking levels. So if that's okay, I'll leave it to questions.
Okay, questions. Councillor Mel Collins.
I'm known for my cheek, and so therefore this is going to be a very cheeky question. Obviously, in order to demolish and rebuild this site, if we give this permission this evening, almost all of the vehicular access is going to be via Brook Lane North. The paving on the west side of Brook Lane North is nothing to behold as it is at the moment. Is there any way that we can put a condition in to ask that the pavement be reinstated, because by the time all of the cargo goes back and forth, there will be no pavement full stop. It would just be completely demolished, and it won't take much. So that's the west side of Brook Lane North, and that would be the access point for most of the vehicular access for the building materials, the carting away of, although that won't take much either to remove the garages. But we've been asking for planning application after planning application, and I do appreciate that this is a housing development. However, there are a lot of infirm folk that live in that area, and it would be a godsend if by some stroke of magic we could actually get the pavement reinstated when the building is finished.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, certainly. Yes, Councillor. That would be covered under the construction logistics plan condition. One of the requirements we have is that there's a pre-condition survey of the road surrounding the site, so that any damage that's caused during construction, we would expect to be reinstated as a result of construction traffic.
Thank you, Councillor Tony Lukey.
I think we should go a little bit, be a little bit more generous on this. It's not about Councillor Collins being cheeky. I know that when we allow the development of the former Marlborough garage site on London Road, that's now known as Fraser-Nash Close, we did account for and put in as a condition a renewal of the pavement, not just precondition and after condition. We should go for a renewal of the pavement. It doesn't appear to be such a long stretch here. So I would suggest that should be conditioned more than just a pre and post inspection. And if there are any, if there are likely to be any redundant crossovers, then they should be filled in to allow for a smooth allow for a smooth passage for pedestrians. I don't see why. I see a big old Versailles going on in the corner there, but I don't see why that can't be. That if the committee suggests that, then it should be agreed.
Are we okay over there? Yeah, we all right there? Can we do that?
Yeah, so it is within the red line of the application site, that area. So yes, you would be able to apply such a condition if members see fit to do so.
Excellent. We'll do that. Alan, Councillor Alan Mitchell.
Yeah, just a quick one, Matthew.
point of clarity, the surrounding roads are a CPZ. How many parking spaces are actually within this development retained? Is it 6 or is it 1 or what is it?
So it's a car-free development, councillor.
Car
So it's,
free?
yeah, it's just parking spaces are lost.
So 0. It's 0. No blue badge or I read something like no scale electrics. Oh.
Not for the new residents, no.
Okay. Councillor Guy Lambert.
I'm actually amazed that Councillor Collins didn't raise this. Adjacent to this site is the well-known footbridge over the railway without lights, which ever since I've been a
You beat me
councillor
to it, Councillor Lambert. That was my next bit. Sorry.
it's like Monty Python's cheese shop. There's always a new reason why lights can't be put on that. The last I heard was there aren't any officers in traffic. Previous to that, it will dazzle the train drivers. This will put extra demand on that footbridge, which has got plenty of demand already. So I don't think this is technically a planning issue, but I'd like to put a condition. If you're going to get me to sign up to this, I'd like to have a commitment from the traffic department that they're going to fix that blooming bridge.
And I have to say that was actually what I was going to raise after the other councillors had to go, because it's probably got to be one of our little burning issues. Yeah, exactly. But yeah. So can we're not asking much.
So yeah, so maybe I can answer that. So we've recently had a 3-year delivery plan approved, and part of that plan will include a community wish list, if you like. So I can certainly discuss with colleagues who deliver the programme to make sure that's added to the list. I can certainly.
Yeah, top of the list. Thank you. Top of the list in Brentford.
It was on the list at the time when you had an interim manager, and he said, "Well, we can't do it because I haven't got any officers. We're a bit busy at the moment."
Yeah, no, I'll certainly raise that with colleagues. If it's not on the list, we'll make sure it's on.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment, ask a question, or can we move? You move approval, Councillor Bell, Colin, and conditions. Yes, subject to the conditions as arranged, and that's seconded by Councillor Samia Chowdhury. Okay. Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you. Yep, that's all. That's all. Thank you. Okay. Let's do Crane Bank next. And then, because it makes it a bit silly, you going out for however long it's going to take, and then how long back. So, right. So let's do Crane Bank, please. Next. Okay. So this is Crane Bank, Silver Jubilee Way, Cranford, and it's on pages 123 to 181 in the paper. And then there is quite a bit of an addendum on the paper, which I hope you've seen. Anyway, right. Over to Matthew, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is BA Crane Bank right next to the airport over in Cranford. This is before you tonight because it's an application referable to the GLA, and it's also got some financial contributions attached to it. Essentially what it is it's demolishing an ad hoc mixture of buildings on the site, all industrial use. Sorry, the majority of which are industrial uses. There's a data centre in there as well, which is soon to be become vacant itself. And the proposal is to replace these buildings. I'll come back to the photos of the site if you want me to, but with 2 new industrial units on the site. So that's what it would look like. These are the elevations. Again, I'm rushing through it, so please do get me to come back and speak about any particular issue if you would like me to. But essentially, if I go back to the site plan, the issues are that to the west of the site and to the north of the site is Greenbelt, and that's the River Crane running to the west of the site as well. And then directly, so to the east of the site, there's kind of northeast is industrial buildings, but then to the northeast is Cranford School. So essentially, these are quite tall buildings next to the Greenbelt, but we're suggesting there's a buffer zone retained. It is an LSIS site, sorry, a locally significant industrial site. There is greening proposed on the boundaries. There are also contributions proposed, which is this has been discussed and agreed with Force. So it's Friends of the River Crane Environment, sorry. £15,000 to the Broadway running along the River Crane, and £40,000 for ecological improvements. And then again, discussions took place with Cranford Primary School, who haven't raised objections to the scheme, but as part of this, there'd be £15,000 given towards a nature garden within the school, together with various other contributions to do with access. There's a £30,000 pedestrian crossing going in there as well. If it's okay, I'll leave it at that, because I believe it's a positive scheme, and leave it to questions.
Any Councillor Mel Collins?
Sorry, Chair. Two brief ones. One you may not know the answer to, but when I read this report, the only concern I had was the new car parking building. How many car parking spaces are there? And what I was concerned about was that there was going to be adequate lighting at night time for the access and egress of the traffic going on to whatever road it is there, without spoiling the ecology, which, you know, all of the contributions is going to hopefully enhance. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but I think it's important that we balance proper lighting with the access and egress, but taking full account of the contributions that are being made for the enhancement of the area. That's my first question. And the most important one really is what benefits are there going to be locally in terms of employment?
Thank you, Councillor. So starting off with the car park, it's 257 car parking spaces proposed, but that's down from 966 spaces as existing. So it's over 700 reduction in car parking spaces for something broadly the same size, well, of a similar scale. So it's also in an area which isn't very publicly accessible, but it's a locally significant industrial site, so we need it for industrial uses. So on that basis, we're suggesting it's okay. The lighting would be generally something that you would expect as part of an ecological plan to come in. I don't have that information in front of me, so if it's okay, I'll just latch on a lighting plan to the ecology condition on the report. So I would do that. And I'm so sorry, I forgot the last question. Oh, so okay, sorry. I believe this to be in the report about how many people would be employed as part of the scheme. I can quickly flick through it and try and find it.
Okay, while he's doing that, I've got a couple of people. I've got three people now wanting to ask questions. Okay, so I'll take Michael first. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so I noted some of the issues that the Greater London Authority and TfL raised with this application. So one of them was to deal with the car parking provision. The Greater London Authority felt that that there was too many car parking spaces here. It said that a reduction in car parking provision should be provided so that it's in line with the London Plan maximum standards. And TfL recommended that a staff shuttle bus could be considered. And then just further on, there were some further issues that I think TfL felt ought to be looked at in more detail. A breakdown of the type of cycle parking, and then further work needed being doing on the sort of trip generation assessment, and also there's a construction management plan to be secured by conditions. Will these things take place as part of conditions, or are they things that need to happen?
Sorry, Councillor. So construction logistics plan will be a condition, that will be our standard condition requiring a lot of detailed information to be provided prior to commencement of any works. So TfL raised concern about the level of parking. The site is in the Heathrow Opportunity Area, so the parking standards are very restrictive in the London Plan. There's quite a lot of discussion taking place on that, and we feel that the level of parking that's proposed has been reduced from the original submission so it's down now to 257 spaces. On balance, we feel that is appropriate for this site, bearing in mind the public transport accessibility level of it. And we're also securing a car park management plan to make sure that the car parking is managed properly in a proper way, because it's likely that there'll be shift work at the site. So we just need to make sure it's managed and that the access roads and everything else are kept clear of parking. Their concern about trip generation is not, as I understand it, the proposed trip generation, which should be a reduction on the previous use, but it's how the trip generation for the previous use was or the existing use on the site was calculated. It's something that comes up quite often. It's because it's been vacant for so long. They take issue with how the previous trip generation was calculated in, or has been calculated by the applicant in this case. But again, bearing in mind the level of car parking, we're content that there'll be a reduction in the total level of traffic. And there's been further discussions with TfL about, and they're now content with the cycle parking.
Okay, Councillor Richard Foote.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this particular area, this was British Airways head office. So a lot of the parking, I mean, is very high level of parking on there, but basically 9 till 5. You know, this was the sort of thing. But there was another aspect there when they built that site, was that, and it's interesting to see whether or not it's been picked up in for the development. But when it was originally built, the entire heating for the British Airways building came from underground heating that was, you know, extracting heat out of the ground to heat it, which is pretty much a, you know, a revolutionary thing at that time we're talking about. But you know, it'd be interesting to see whether or not that's been picked up anywhere as still there, because it's, you know, or whether it's possible, whether BA ate it all up and it's no longer there. I don't know.
You've demonstrated more order on the site than I have. Sorry, Councillor. I've got my standard response. It's a 70% reduction in carbon emissions over Part L. Sorry for that. That's through renewable sources, not through some ingenuity in heating systems. So sorry to disappoint you on that front. I'm interested as well, to be perfectly honest. I'll try and find out and let you know.
Okay, Councillor Tony Lukey.
I'm looking at the document that was sent by the applicants emailed to us the other day. Consultation and engagement. I mean, I know that, they sent out 3,700 letters. I don't know how many they got back. Are you people from Cranebank there? Yeah, okay. I don't know how many they got back, and I do know. I'm not saying they're the usual suspects, and I've got great respect for the Friends of River Crane Environment. They do very good work, and they do involve communities. There are other organisations around there that deliver on in the area there. Cranford Action Group, I don't know if you've come across them, but they do immense work. And if there's anybody that's cleaned up that riverside for nothing, week in, week out, and all the bags that you see them collected, not just from there, but all the way up to the M3, because the government doesn't, Department of Transport doesn't clean it. Highways England. Anyway, I sort of digress. It's not as amazing as heat pumps, but what I'd like, and where we can condition it, and I'm surprised that the London Borough of Hounslow hasn't come in with some support, as we do when there are ever developments down in Isleworth to support our local parks. But you've got Way Avenue open space there, right behind this. When I looked at your, when I looked at the document here that you sent out, you referred to it as it's referred to as a local nature reserve, but it's not the local nature reserve. It's a local park, and I think we should look for some support from this developer, particularly for that park and for the communities around that park. Enhance the entrances, and you've got allotments there that where there are community organisations that deliver. Shine Hounslow, associated with the Heston West Big Local, deliver down there, and they do an amazing food production. They've got some good allotment work there, and they feed people from those allotments. So I'd like something from our officers to say that they will negotiate some. And I think I'm looking for some heads nodding over there, but I can't. But they got those poker masks on. I'd like to see some other support there, or if you enhance some of that contribution to Friends of River Crane Environment, that will be earmarked or ring fenced for real local groups. Immediately local groups in Cranford. I don't know whether the local council has got involved, but some real support for the communities there. Byron, from Byron Avenue, that angle from the 312 to the A30 and the houses behind the houses behind Way Avenue open space. So can you get something on there, please, Matthew?
I'm glad that we have people representing the area here, the application here, so they can hear what we're saying. Because I think that it is indeed highly commendable what's been going on in that area. In fact, astonishing the amounts of work that has gone on, which I think we're all pretty much aware of. Councillor Guy Lambert.
I'm quite interested in the stuff that TfL and GLA have put up as concerns, which I'm not clear that they've been addressed. In particular, I mean, one of the things that I'm very aware of in this site is that there's the lovely Crane Park that adjoins this site, and then all of a sudden that hits against the A30, and it's an impossible crossing. It's awful. And one of the things that TfL say, TfL requests a contribution to commission a more detailed study of crossing options at this location. It's not obvious how you do it, but yeah. So I see Rob had his finger on the button there.
Yeah, Councillor, that is included in the Section 106 agreement. So there's a contribution of £30,000 towards a feasibility study for a crossing on the A30. And if it proves feasible, there's a further contribution towards of £100,000 towards active travel improvements. So that can then, part of that could then be used to implement if we implement a crossing if TfL agree that it's feasible in that location. I completely agree with you about the crossing at that point.
Okay, that's it. Okay, right. Does somebody want to do something? Councillor Guy Lambert.
I move approval.
Who's that? Oh, we've got lots of seconders. Right. Just okay. You got somebody. Thank you. Okay, those in favour, please show.
Chair, and subject to those enhancements of of those conditions.
Okay, can we?
Sorry. Can I be clear? Just to be clear about. Sorry, councillors, I'm just doing my job for as providing legal advice in relation to planning conditions, which is what you're suggesting. There's a number of tests, and one of those is relevant to the development to be permitted. And I'm just querying how relevant this would be as a condition, particularly given that it's not a residential development contributing to open space. I think plus, as regards a financial contribution, you can't do that by that shouldn't be done by condition. The alternative is for it to be incorporated into the Section 106. But again, I think we need to just think about the test in relation to that as regards whether it passed that test and how relevant it is to this actual planning permission. I feel I need to say that. I appreciate that there's been indication from the developer as being accepted.
Okay, there's two things here. One are the conditions that we've asked for, which have been accepted by Rob, so that's fine. And then we've looked at the enhancements, which are Section 106 type numbers. And I think we were looking at a few nods. And I don't know whether the person who was nodding the most is the one who's allowed to nod most, or is not allowed to nod most, and is going to have to do something with his bosses. But I'm just giving them an indication now. If those enhancements are acceptable to you, then we won't take that as a condition, but we'll call it as an enhancement, a Section 106 type area, which can be negotiated with our officers.
So
Well, Rob.
Can I just share something? Sorry. So if we take this away with the applicants, and if we don't get anything that successful, if we don't get what you're looking for, Councillor Lukey, we'll bring it back to planning committee in a future day.
Yeah. Okay. And then we'll tell you off. Right.
So I'll just let you know what happens, Councillor, and maybe the chair and Councillor Lukey, if I let you know what happens out of that, and if you wanted to come back, we'll bring it back.
Yeah, definitely. That's as soon as you know anything, you can let me know, and then obviously if it needs to be discussed further, then obviously or otherwise, is that okay?
Yeah, I'm sure the applicants wouldn't want to,
No.
spend the amount of money they'd spend on coming back, and when they've got better things to do, the opportunity cost. I'm sure they'd be happy to add 20, 30 grand to that for those local enhancements, if not more.
Enough. Right. Can we just have the vote now, please, people? Those in favour? Can I see? Those in favour? Looks like all. Thank you very much. Okay, that's been approved. On to the last application, not quite the last part of the agenda, but the last part of the applications. We will go to Ferry Wharf. So we would like you back for the last bit just to hear the note if you want. It is the report on the performance which is to be noted, unless you, if you have. Yeah. No. He moves himself physically. Yeah, so that it can be noted in the minutes, please. If you sit at the back, that's fine. And then we can, that's lovely. Thank you. He won't interfere with anything, so, okay. Okay, over to Matthew. Ferry Wharf. Land to the southeast of Ferry Lane, Brentford, pages 10 to 24. And I think there's a tiny addendum at the front somewhere. Can I see? Yes. And there's a tiny addendum. Yes, okay. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So Ferry Wharf to east of Ferry Lane, we're in Scion Ward. The application is for the retention, so it's an so they are operating currently the retention of an outdoor rowing facility for a period of 2 years. So it's the use of the area as an outdoor rowing facility and the associated structures, which I'll show you some pictures on shortly. Sorry, no, I'll linger on the site plan briefly. So this is all part of the Ferry Wharf redevelopment approved back in 1999, 2000, around that time. This is a patch of land that was left over from it. The commitment was that there would be some form of boathouse development developed on the site. That was part of the Section 106. That never actually came forward subsequent to that Section 106 agreement. Something happened in 2005. There was an application for a boathouse which was refused. And at that point, it does not seem to have been brought forward, which has left us with this site, but that I believe is going to be pertinent to this application. So this is what it looks like. So you're looking at Ferry Wharf at the moment, and looking at some pictures of the structures. We had the benefit of them being on site at the moment, but the bulk of them are these boat racks, these quite substantial structures, which is 0.5 and that towards the center of it. I'll go through the photos and show you what it looks like anyway, but there's storage containers, equipment stores, rigger stores, a training marquee, a portaloos, and then surrounded by a metal fence. And then there is this bamboo screening to the north and west of the site, which is the most prominent from the surrounding townscape. So west and southern boundary, so surrounded by fencing, and as you can see, the most that you see there is these boat racks containing the kayaks, canoes, and there you can see the boat racks, and then some of the storage containers on the site, the portaloos, and then the stairs to the river, which is just outside where the storage area is. And then there's a picture of the gazebo as it is existing. And some elevations of the storage container. I won't linger on it, but the proposal is for 2 years. After those 2 years, we would be adding condition to ensure that it's restored to its former condition, and then to look for a more permanent solution. There were 35 objections to this application, which is why it's before you tonight. I'm going to tentatively suggest that they were concerned about noise and disturbance resulting from the use of the site, and obviously they had practical experience of what was happening at that time because it was in use. Originally, they wanted to have opening hours of 5:30 a.m. through to 8:30 p.m. 7 days a week. They've amended that to 6 a.m. To 8:30 p.m. during term time and 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. during school holidays. They're suggesting they need the 6 a.m. starting time to give kids the opportunity to go through their classes and then get to school on time. So we are recommending some conditions to secure that. In terms of the general use, it does comply with the original intention of the site to have it open up the river. It's compatible with our policies that seek to open that river for recreation use. So there's no issues that I can see that are to do with the actual use of the site. So we're suggesting with these conditions to restrict the use to 2 years and restrict opening times that it's acceptable. So if it's okay, I'll leave it to questions.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor John Todd? You'd like to move the recommendation? Somebody? Yes, thank you, Gary, seconding that. Can I just see all those in favour, please? Again, all that are here. Yeah. Okay, so that's been approved. Right. Do you want to join us again, Michael? Or you just sit there? We don't mind. Okay, so now, okay, on the addendum report, there is a report on the performance of the development management and planning enforcement. This is for noting. And I'm sure that one of the things you've noted is the amount of money that's been gathered is quite considerably. The SIL, which is interesting. Okay, so we'll.
Chair.
Sorry, Mel. Yeah, right. Well, that's coming. Right, Councillor Tony Lukey.
I know it's before your time as chair of this committee, and in previous times when we approved, and there might be a Councillor Guy Lambert's here, Councillor John Todd is here from when we were on the planning committee a while back. Whenever there were developments in Hounslow Town Centre, and Wendy might remember this as well, whenever there were we approved planning applications in the town centre. And we always recommended that SIL be spent on the elements of SIL be spent on local parks within 15 minutes walk of a development in the town centre. And so since then we've got that, we've got that monster over there and the on Key Site 1, various other where there are other various other buildings, including on the Old Permuted site and Hounslow Town School. But what we're not getting, and we have to beg, and we have to scratch around, we're not getting investment in the parks locally. We're not getting enough investment in Inwood Park, in Lambton Park, in Thornbury Park, for example, because we've had a little bit of investment. We've had a path put in. We bid for some money, and we got some approved down at Thornbury Park. But we haven't been getting, we haven't seen the investment in our parks which cover Osley and Spring Grove Ward, a bit of it, Hounslow Central Ward, Hounslow West Ward, there, and as a result of these, we're told it's not a development area. But when you go to Feltham, I don't begrudge Feltham their investment. Absolutely not. The west of the borough, the investment there at Hamworth Park, at Feltham Arenas, even the little parks, pocket parks there in that part of the borough. But we're not getting it here. When I look at the bids made. Look at the bids made, and we look and we do get reports on SIL, Councillor Collins. There's going to be a report going to Cabinet next week, and the bids that we've made, say, for example, for even just some simple goalposts and a little bit of cricket net down at Thornbury Park, officers have been advising and have been advising, and on the report it says, oh, we're not going to give any SIL to that. So look, I really like from this meeting to remind everybody that this is what councillors back then were agreeing, that that money goes towards parks. So I calculated it. There's something like 2,000 units have been built within 15 minutes walk of Thornbury Park. Most of that park is in Hounslow Central Ward. It's not in a little bit of it is in Osley and Spring Grove Ward, but that's not being invested. That money's not being invested. And I know I've got the lead member here. She doesn't decide SIL. But I think we should. I'd like that minuted that we are looking for those ambitions of previous planning committee, that SIL parts of sill for those big developments go towards, we're looking at probably around 10 million, 12 million pounds worth of sill for those developments that go towards improving our local parks there.
Don't think anyone here is going to say anything other, and the lead member would like to have a word, so I'll put you wear that other hat tonight.
No, just a quick one to say, overall, if you see to Councillor Lukey, I think you have seen a lot of money we have spent for parks. When you're talking about the SIL money, yes, I completely agree. Yes, we should be looking into it, and I know Parks team is really looking into it already before you bringing it in here. But I think we've previously talked about it as well when we have supported the Thornbury Park paths as well. Yes, but if you see with 260 parks and open spaces and the pocket parks and everything, we have with not just with the SIL, with amount of the budget we've had, we've gone, with Hounslow West, if you say we haven't done anything there, Beaversfield Park have had a good amount, and Inwood Park had the first one to have the camera there, Councillor
Yeah,
Lukey.
hang on. Can we, I think this is about SIL, and I think you're right. I think you've done amazing things with the parks, and I think we're very clear about that because we've seen the most amazing number of green flags this year that's been awarded to Hounslow, which is fabulous. But I think what Councillor Lukey is suggesting is that there is money that is major money in SIL that could go to our parks, and we all know, we've had 2 years of this, and we're looking at the mental health of our residents, etc. And we know that if you go out into open spaces, if you get involved with nature, how much better that is for your mental health. So we're just going to say here, we're just going to put another plug in and support you in your demand for more money, because I know that's what you're doing.
That's what
yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
So
That's what exactly I've started off with, to say that we're already looking into it with the Parks team.
Excellent. Councillor Richard Foote.
Yeah, as you know, the SIL has been a bone of contention with me for several years. You didn't know that, were you?
Oh.
Anyway, I'll ignore that. There have been situations where I've discussed with certain senior officers of the council and members of the council about the redistribution of SIL, whether it's strategic or local, and we get some answers, and I get some very confusing answers about what it can be used for. When Theo was, for instance, distributing it all, we got some really funny answers. But as far as I'm concerned, we should be getting much more of the SIL money that is going to be used, not just for spending in the immediately location of a building that's gone up and the SIL money's been earned from, but also on the other areas within the borough that are available for SIL money, which has been earned in, as I was told, well, it's all earned up in Brentford, so that's where we're going to spend it all. That's not the way I see SIL.
I don't think that's true. Anyway, hold on.
That's what you were thinking.
Hold on. People, no, stop it
No,
now.
it's not. It's what I was told.
Excuse me. I'm going to check. Sorry, stop this now. Can you turn your mic off, please, Councillor Richard Foote? I think it's very clear that we want SIL spent across the borough, because SIL is a different scenario. Section 106 monies, we know, kind of has lots of other factors around it, so that's one thing. But the money isn't being spent just in Brentford, I can assure you, with all the buildings and developments that are going on there, because we know what is going on there. And what I'm saying is, I think it does need to be distributed around, and I think it's probably something that other areas, rather than the planning department, will have to look at. But I think we can certainly get that minuted, and we can certainly get that sent up to the powers that be. And I think a lot of us are in a position where we can say that to various people. So I think we should all be acting, because it's just as important. We look at our parks across the borough, that's one thing, but we look at other areas, other things that can be done as well. And I think we are all very clear about that. And it's not just about one area, and it doesn't really matter what an officer says about, because I think sometimes some of the officers will say something, because they're worried that you will be asking them for more money. And we just have to say, look, it's not just down to the officers to decide. Strangely enough, members make the policy, officers carry it out, and let's leave it like that for that. So here we go. Other planning matters. Any other business which I consider urgent, I haven't had any, and the date of the next meeting is the 3rd of February 2022. So 3rd of February, okay. And I thank you all very much for your attendance tonight, and good night.
I did